You ever notice how the coldest places aren't made of ice and stone, but of silk and ceremony? How a man can stand in a room full of people and still be the loneliest bastard alive? That's where this story starts. Not with love, but with its opposite. Not with freedom, but with golden chains. And if you think you know how this ends just because you've heard about dukes and seamstresses before, stick around. Because what happens when a man finally breaks isn't always pretty. And it sure as hell isn't simple. But the December wind bit through the stone walls of Windsor Palace like it had personal business with everyone inside. Vincent Ashford stood at the window of his private chambers, watching snow accumulate on the courtyard below, each flake another second of his life settling into permanent cold. 28 years old, Duke of Ashford for 6 years, married for 5, and every damn one of those days felt like drowning in velvet. Behind him, his valet Edmund moved with practiced silence, laying out the evening's formal wear. Black coat, silver buttons, white cravat starched so stiff it could cut. The uniform of a man who'd stopped being a person somewhere along the way. Vincent's reflection stared back from the dark window glass. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair swept back in the fashion his wife insisted upon. Eyes that used to burn with something other than exhaustion. He looked like his father now. That was the worst part. Not just the resemblance, but the same deadness behind the eyes that the old Duke had carried right up until his heart stopped beating during a parliamentary session. At least he died doing something he cared about, Vincent thought. Politics. Power. The Ashford legacy. All the things Vincent had never wanted and couldn't escape. The door opened without a knock. It never did anymore. Beatrice Ashford swept in like winter itself had learned to wear taffeta. His wife, Duchess. The most beautiful weapon her father had ever forged. Pale skin, blonde hair arranged in elaborate curls that took her maid 3 hours every morning, a dress of deep blue that cost more than most families earned in a year. She didn't look at Vincent so much as assess him, the way a general surveys a disappointing battlefield. Not a word of greeting. 5 years, and she'd stopped pretending they were anything other than business partners who happened to share a name. Vincent turned from the window. The Rothschild banquet. Obviously, her voice carried that particular edge she'd perfected, sharp enough to cut but refined enough to pass for civility in public. I trust you remember the talking points Father prepared. Lord Waverley will be there with his committee, and we need his support for the canal investment. We. As if they were a team. As if Vincent gave a damn about canal investments or her father's endless political maneuvering. I remember. Do you? She moved to the mirror, adjusting an earring that didn't need adjusting. Because last month at the Kensington reception, you forgot to mention the railway proposal to Duke Morrison. Father was quite disappointed. There it was. Father. Not my father. Just father. Like the man was some kind of deity they both served. Lord Harrison Thorne, the real power behind the Ashford title ever since Vincent's own father died, and left him a dukedom he'd never wanted, and a marriage contract already signed in blood and ink. Vincent watched her in the mirror, this beautiful stranger he'd promised to honor. I'll try to contain your father's disappointment this evening. Her eyes flicked to his reflection, cold, calculating. Your sarcasm is showing, Vincent. It's unbecoming. So is your father's greed, but that doesn't stop him. The words came out before he could cage them. 5 years of swallowing everything, and sometimes the poison just came back up. Beatrice went very still. When she turned to face him, her expression hadn't changed at all, which was somehow worse than anger. My father saved this estate from your family's incompetence. He saved your title, your reputation, everything you have because of him. Everything I have. Vincent laughed, and it sounded like something breaking. Christ, Beatrice, listen to yourself. I'm listening to reality. She stepped closer, and he could smell her perfume, French, expensive, chosen by someone else. Everything about her was chosen by someone else. You were a second son with romantic notions about whatever it was boys like you dream about. Freedom, adventure. Your brother was supposed to inherit, but he died. And you got a title you weren't prepared for and responsibilities you didn't understand. Father gave you structure, purpose, a future. He gave me you. The words hung between them like a verdict. Beatrice's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, he did. And whether you appreciate it or not, this marriage is the only reason the Ashford name still means anything. So you'll go to the banquet tonight, you'll smile at Lord Waverley, you'll mention the canal investment, and you'll remember that your personal feelings are irrelevant compared to your duty. Duty. The word that had replaced love before the ink dried on their marriage certificate. Vincent turned back to the window. I'll be ready in 20 minutes. See that you are. Her footsteps retreated, precise and measured. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Edmund cleared his throat gently. Your coat, Your Grace. Vincent let the old man help him into the formal wear, each button a small surrender. Edmund had been with the family since Vincent's childhood, had watched him grow from a boy who climbed trees and dreamed of sailing to a man who couldn't remember the last time he'd done anything that mattered. Edmund? Your Grace? Did you ever want something different from your life? The valet's hands paused on Vincent's collar. For a moment, something human flickered across his weathered face. Every man does, Your Grace. The question is whether we have the courage to reach for it. And do we? Edmund stepped back, his expression settling into professional neutrality. Most of us don't. But I suspect you're not most men. Vincent studied his reflection in the mirror. The Duke stared back, proper, respectable, dead inside. I used to think that, he said quietly. I don't anymore. The Rothschild banquet took place in Windsor's grand ballroom, a monument to excess that made Vincent's teeth hurt. Crystal chandeliers the size of carriages, gold leaf everywhere. Enough candles to light a small city, all so 300 of England's wealthiest could gather and pretend their money made them important. Vincent stood near one of the massive marble columns, champagne in hand, listening to Lord Waverley drone on about tariff reform. The man had a talent for making even corruption sound boring. Across the room, Beatrice held court with a cluster of ministers' wives, her laugh crystalline and calculated. She was good at this, better than Vincent would ever be. The performance of importance, the theater of power. She thrived in it the way some men thrive in battle. Maybe that's all we are, Vincent thought. Soldiers in different armies, forced into an alliance neither of us wanted. Lord Waverley was still talking, something about shipping routes and profit margins. Vincent made appropriate noises, nodded at appropriate moments, and wondered what it would feel like to just walk away. To leave the champagne on the column, push through the glittering crowd, and never come back. He'd made it halfway through the fantasy when he saw her. She stood near the servants' entrance at the far end of the ballroom, partially hidden by the heavy curtains. Not a guest. Not one of the pampered ladies draped in jewels and judgment. A working woman, dressed simply in a dark dress that had seen better years, her brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. She carried a large basket, and she was staring up at one of the massive curtains with the focused intensity of someone solving a problem. Vincent watched as she reached up, examining the fabric where it had torn along the top edge. Her fingers moved carefully, assessing the damage. There was something about the way she worked, completely absorbed, oblivious to the spectacle happening 20 feet away, that made everything else in the room seem even more ridiculous. Lord Waverley touched his arm. Your Grace? Your thoughts on the matter? Forgive me, Lord Waverley. Vincent set down his champagne. I need a moment. We'll continue this discussion shortly. He didn't wait for a response. The old Vincent wouldn't have just walked away from a lord mid-conversation, but the old Vincent had died sometime in the last 5 years, and what was left didn't care about Waverley's wounded pride. The woman didn't notice him approaching. She'd produced a small notebook from her basket and was sketching something, her brow furrowed in concentration. Quite a tear, Vincent said. She startled, the notebook almost slipping from her hands. When she turned, he got his first clear look at her face. Young, maybe 25, tired eyes, but sharp, capable, and currently looking at him like he was a problem she hadn't anticipated. Your Grace. She curtsied quickly, almost dropping the notebook again. I apologize. I was told to assess the damage before the banquet. I didn't mean to. You're fine. Vincent glanced up at the torn curtain. Can it be fixed? She followed his gaze, and some of the nervousness left her expression, replaced by professional assessment. Yes, the fabric is still strong, just the hem stitching failed. Poor thread choice, probably rushed work for the event. I can reinforce it properly, but it'll need to come down. You know textiles. I should hope so, Your Grace. I've been mending the palace wardrobes for 3 years. She gestured to her basket. Clara Whitmore, head seamstress. Head seamstress. Which meant she'd probably repaired half the clothes in this room, and none of the people wearing them would know her name. Vincent Ashford. He saw her expression shift, remembering she already knew exactly who he was. Though I suppose we've established that. A tiny smile flickered across her face. Yes, Your Grace. How long will the repair take? An evening, if I can work uninterrupted. The ballroom will need to be empty. Vincent glanced back at the crowd. 300 people. Another 3 hours of speeches and political maneuvering and pretending any of it mattered. Then they'd all drift away to their townhouses and country estates, and the palace would belong to people like Clara again, the ones who actually kept it running. They'll be here until midnight at least, he said. Later, if the brandy flows freely enough. Clara nodded, making a note in her book. I'll return after. You'll work all night? She looked at him like the question confused her. It needs to be ready for tomorrow's state dinner, Your Grace, so yes. No complaint, no request for additional help or compensation, just the simple acceptance of what needed to be done. Vincent felt something twist in his chest, though he couldn't quite name it. Do you enjoy it? The question came out before he could stop it. The work. Clara's expression shifted, surprise, and something else. She studied him for a moment, like she was trying to determine if the question was genuine or some kind of trap. I do, she said finally. There's something honest about fixing things. You can see when it's done right, when it's beautiful. Most work isn't like that. Beautiful. When was the last time Vincent had done anything beautiful? Your Grace! Beatrice's voice cut through the ballroom noise like a blade. She stood near the orchestra, her smile fixed in place but her eyes glacial. Lord Morrison has just arrived. Translation. Stop talking to the help and get back to work. Vincent felt Clara step back, folding herself toward invisibility the way servants learn to do, becoming part of the scenery, unimportant. I should go, she said quietly. Wait. Vincent didn't know why he said it, didn't know what he wanted, except that returning to Beatrice and Lord Morrison and another hour of performance felt impossible. The curtain. You said you'd need the room empty. Yes, Your Grace. I'll make sure you're not disturbed. After midnight, when the banquet ends, no one will bother you. Clara blinked. That's very kind, Your Grace, but unnecessary. Consider it done. He turned before she could argue, making his way back to Beatrice and the waiting lord. But as he walked, he was aware of Clara behind him, still standing by the curtain, probably trying to figure out why a duke would care whether she was interrupted while working. Vincent didn't have a good answer. Only that for the first time in 5 years, he'd had a conversation that felt real. And real was dangerous when everything else was performance. Well, midnight came and went. The banquet finally ended around 1 a.m, lords and ladies stumbling out to their carriages, drunk on champagne and their own importance. Vincent watched them leave from a second-floor window, Beatrice beside him, close enough to maintain appearances but not touching. They never touched unless someone was watching. Successful evening, Beatrice said, though her tone suggested she was reading from a script. Father will be pleased. Lord Waverley practically guaranteed his support for the canal vote. Good. Lord Morrison wants to discuss the railroad expansion. I told him you'd call on him next week. Fine. Beatrice turned to look at him fully. Are you even listening? I agreed to everything you said. What more do you want? I want... She stopped. For a brief moment, something that might have been frustration or exhaustion crossed her face. Then it was gone, replaced by the usual ice. Never mind. I'm going to bed. Don't wake me when you come up. As if he would. As if they shared anything more than an address. She left, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Vincent waited until he was certain she was gone, then made his way back down to the ballroom. Clara was already there. She'd pulled one of the palace ladders over to the wall and was working on taking down the torn curtain, her movements careful and methodical. She'd removed her outer dress and worked in her shirt sleeves, practical in a way that none of the ladies upstairs would ever understand. She didn't hear him enter. Vincent watched for a moment as she unhooked the massive curtain from its rod, managing the heavy fabric with practiced ease. There was something almost meditative about her work, a kind of focus he envied. Need help? She jerked, nearly losing her balance on the ladder. Vincent moved without thinking, crossing the room in 3 strides to steady it. Clara looked down at him, eyes wide. Your Grace, I thought everyone had retired. Most people have. Vincent kept his hand on the ladder. But I said I'd make sure you weren't disturbed. Seemed wrong to promise that and then go to sleep. She climbed down slowly, the heavy curtain draped over one arm. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her face, the kind that came from years of work that started before dawn and ended after midnight. You really don't need to stay, she said. I'm used to working alone. I'm sure you are, but maybe I'm not used to being alone without work. The words came out more honest than he'd intended. Clara studied him, and he had the unsettling feeling she saw more than most people bothered to look for. All right then, she said finally. Help me spread this out on the floor. I need to see the full extent of the damage. They worked in silence for a while, Clara examining every inch of the massive curtain, Vincent helping her lay it flat and turn it when needed. The ballroom felt different now, empty of people but full of echoes, music, laughter, the ghosts of 100 conversations that meant nothing. Can I ask you something, Your Grace? Vincent looked up from where he was holding down a section of fabric. Vincent? And yes, Vincent, she repeated like she was testing how the word felt. Why are you really here? She gestured around the empty ballroom. This is strange. Dukes don't help seamstresses at 1 a.m. Maybe this duke does. Maybe this duke is avoiding something. Sharp. He liked that. Vincent sat back on his heels, looking at the curtain instead of her. You said earlier that there's something honest about fixing things, that you can see when it's done right. Yes, I can't remember the last time I did anything where I could see if it was done right. Everything's politics, appearances, saying the right thing to the right person at the right time, and none of it. He stopped, surprised by how much he wanted to tell her. None of it feels real. Clara was quiet for a long moment. When he looked up, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Being a duke sounds lonely, she said finally. Being anything can be lonely if you're doing it with the wrong people. She nodded slowly, then went back to examining the curtain. Well, if you're going to stay and avoid whatever you're avoiding, you might as well make yourself useful. Thread that needle for me. My eyes are tired. Vincent took the needle and thread she handed him. His hands, so used to holding champagne glasses and signing documents, fumbled with the small implements. Claire watched him struggle for a moment, then reached over to guide his fingers. Like this. Steady hand, quick motion. Don't think about it too much. Her hands were rough with calluses, warm against his. She smelled like lavender and fabric dye, nothing like the expensive perfumes upstairs. When she pulled back, Vincent felt the absence like a cold draft. He got the thread through on the second try. There, Clara said, something like approval in her voice. See? You can fix things too. They worked until nearly 4 a.m. Clara did most of the actual repair, her needle moving in quick, precise strokes that transformed the torn fabric back into something whole. Vincent helped where he could, holding sections taut, fetching her different threads, refilling the oil lamp when it started to dim. And they talked, not about politics or duty or any of the things Vincent usually discussed. Clara told him about growing up in a village outside London, about learning to sew from her mother who'd learned from her mother, about the strange joy of taking something broken and making it beautiful again. He told her about his brother, dead 4 years now in a riding accident, about how he'd never wanted to be Duke, about the suffocating weight of expectations he'd never asked for. She didn't offer sympathy or advice. She just listened, her hands never stopping their work, and somehow that was better than anything else could have been. As dawn started to gray the windows, Clara tied off her final stitch and sat back. There. Good as new. Better, actually. That original stitching was garbage. Vincent studied the repaired curtain. He couldn't even see where the tear had been. You're an artist, she laughed, surprised. I'm a seamstress. You're both. Clara packed up her supplies, suddenly looking shy in a way she hadn't before. Thank you for staying, for helping. You didn't have to. I know. Vincent stood, offering her his hand to help her up. She hesitated, then took it. Clara? Yes? Would you? He stopped, aware he was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. Would you mind if I came back? When you're working, I mean. If you have other repairs. She looked at him for a long moment, her hand still in his. People would talk, Your Grace. Vincent. Vincent. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. People would still talk. Let them. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them was ready to voice. Clara picked up her basket, her movements suddenly brisk. The palace chapel tapestries need restoration, she said, not looking at him. I'll be working on them tomorrow night, after 10. I'll find you. She left without another word, disappearing through the servants' entrance like a ghost. Vincent stood alone in the vast ballroom, watching the sun rise through the windows, and felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Dangerous and fragile and completely inappropriate. And he didn't care. The next 3 weeks unfolded like a secret rebellion. Every night, Vincent found excuses to slip away from dinner parties or council meetings or Beatrice's endless strategic conversations. Every night, he found Clara somewhere in the palace's maze of workrooms and storage chambers, fixing something the nobility had broken without noticing. They didn't touch, barely even stood close, but they talked. God, they talked. Clara told him about books she'd read by candlelight, about her dreams of opening a shop where women could come for clothing that was both beautiful and practical, where they'd be treated like people instead of walking ornaments. She talked about her father, dead in a factory accident when she was 12, about taking care of her younger sister, about the weight of responsibilities she'd never asked for but carried anyway. Vincent told her everything. About Beatrice and the marriage that wasn't really a marriage, about his father-in-law's manipulations, about feeling like a puppet in his own life, about the brother who was supposed to be Duke, who would have been good at it, while Vincent had wanted nothing more than to join the Navy and sail away from everything expected of him. You still could, Clara said one night. They were in one of the old sewing chambers, supposedly abandoned but still full of tools and fabric. Rain hammered the windows while Clara worked on repairing a court dress someone had torn at a recent ball. Sail away, I mean. Not without destroying everything the Ashford name stands for. And that matters to you? Vincent looked at her. A month ago, I would have said yes. Now, I'm not sure what matters anymore. Clara's hand stilled on the dress. Vincent. I know, we can't, I know. You're married. I'm contracted. There's a difference. Not to the world. The world doesn't know what happens behind closed doors. The world sees a duke and duchess who smile at the right times and stand in the right places. They don't see that we're strangers, that we've always been strangers. Clara set down her needle. And what do you see when you look at me? Someone real. The words fell between them like a stone into still water. Clara stood, and for a moment Vincent thought she was going to tell him to leave, to stop coming to her chambers, to remember who he was and who she was, and all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, she crossed to where he sat near the window and stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the pulse in her throat, could smell lavender and rain and something uniquely her. This is dangerous, she said quietly. I know. I could lose everything. My position, my reputation, my sister's future. I know. You're a duke. I'm a seamstress. The world doesn't forgive this. Clara. Vincent stood slowly, giving her time to step back. She didn't. I don't care about the world anymore. I care about the few hours every night when I feel like myself instead of something my father-in-law bought and my wife maintains. I care about talking to someone who sees me instead of a title. I care about you. Her breath caught. Don't say that unless you mean it. I've never meant anything more in my life. They stood there in the flickering lamplight, the rain a drum solo against the windows, balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. Clara reached up slowly, her hand trembling, and touched his cheek. God help us both, she whispered. Vincent kissed her like a drowning man finding air. Like 5 years of suffocation ending in one breath. She tasted like tears and hope and every beautiful thing he'd denied himself in the name of duty. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara pressed her forehead against his. What are we doing? Something honest, Vincent said. Finally, something honest. They were careful. As careful as two people conducting a clandestine relationship in a palace full of servants and nobles could be. Vincent learned the hidden passages Clara knew, the forgotten corridors and abandoned rooms where they could meet without eyes watching. He learned to time his departures from formal dinners, to create excuses that wouldn't raise immediate suspicion. But he also learned that Beatrice wasn't stupid. It started small. A comment here and there about his late nights, a question about where he'd been when he missed a dinner with her father. Vincent deflected, made up excuses about council work and estate business, and watched his wife's eyes grow colder and sharper. She was hunting. He just didn't know what she'd found yet. One night, 3 weeks into the affair, that wasn't really an affair because they'd done nothing but talk and kiss like they could rebuild the world with their mouths, Vincent returned to his chambers to find Beatrice waiting. Not in her own room, in his. She sat in his reading chair, still in her evening gown, a glass of wine in one hand and something white in the other. When she saw him, she stood, and Vincent's stomach went cold. The silk handkerchief, the one Clara had embroidered with her initials and given him 2 nights ago, half joking about proper ladies giving favors to knights. He'd meant to hide it better, but he'd been careless, too happy to think straight. Want to explain this? Beatrice held up the handkerchief like evidence at a trial. Vincent closed the door. It's a handkerchief. With another woman's initials, C.W. Her voice was arctic. Who is she? It's nothing. Don't! Beatrice threw the handkerchief at him. It fluttered uselessly to the floor between them. Don't insult me by pretending I'm stupid. You've been disappearing every night for weeks. You barely speak to me unless we have an audience. And now I find this hidden in your coat like some kind of cheap romance novel. So I'll ask you again, and this time you'll tell me the truth because I am your wife and I deserve at least that much respect. Who is she? Vincent could have lied, should have lied, but 5 years of lies had used up every bit of pretense he had left. Her name is Clara. She works here, in the palace. Beatrice's face went white. A servant. You're fucking a servant. We haven't. Vincent stopped, knowing it didn't matter. The truth was bad enough. She's a seamstress. Oh, how romantic, Beatrice laughed, high and brittle. The lonely duke and the common girl. Tell me, Vincent, did you promise her a better life? Did you spin her stories about love conquering all? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain to me how you throwing away our marriage, our reputation, everything my father built for you is somehow noble. Your father built this for himself. Vincent's control snapped. I was just the convenient idiot with the right last name. He wanted the Ashford title connected to his political machine, and you were the price I paid for inheriting my brother's responsibilities. Don't pretend this marriage was ever about anything else. So that makes betrayal acceptable? That makes humiliating me acceptable? You humiliated yourself the day you agreed to marry a man you didn't love for your father's political gain. Beatrice slapped him. The crack echoed in the quiet room. They stood there, both breathing hard, 5 years of resentment finally naked between them. I could destroy her, Beatrice said quietly. One word to the palace administrator and she'd be dismissed. One word to my father and she'd never work anywhere in England again. Her family, too. Her sister. You said she has a sister? I could ruin all of them. Ice flooded Vincent's veins. Beatrice. But I won't. She stepped back, something calculating sliding across her face. Not yet. Because unlike you, I understand strategy. Unlike you, I think before I act. What do you want? I want you to end it. Tonight. Cleanly. Tell her it was a mistake. Tell her whatever you need to tell her, but it ends. And then you and I will continue as we have been. Publicly united, privately separate. The world will never know any of this happened. Vincent stared at her. And if I refuse, then I destroy her. I divorce you with enough scandal that the Ashford name becomes worthless, and my father withdraws all support from your estates. You'll lose everything. The title will mean nothing. You'll be a duke of bankruptcy and shame. She moved to the door, paused. You have until tomorrow night. End it, or I will. She left. Vincent stood alone in his chamber, the embroidered handkerchief still on the floor, and realized he'd just been given an ultimatum he couldn't win. Clara or everything else. Love or duty. The man he was becoming or the duke he was supposed to be. He found Clara in the small sewing chamber behind the ballroom where they'd first really talked. She was working on something white and delicate, her face soft in the candlelight, and when she looked up and saw him, her smile could have powered the sun. "Vincent, I wasn't expecting you tonight. I thought you had—" She stopped, reading his expression. "What's wrong?" He meant to ease into it, meant to be gentle. But looking at her, at this woman who'd become the only real thing in his life, gentle seemed like another lie. "Beatrice knows." The color drained from Clara's face. "What?" Vincent told her everything. The handkerchief, the confrontation, the ultimatum. Clara listened without speaking, her hands going still on the fabric in her lap. When he finished, the silence stretched like a wound. "So," she said finally, her voice small, "what are you going to do?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." Clara stood, setting aside her sewing with careful precision. "You're going to end this, because you're a duke and I'm nobody, and in the world we live in, that's all that matters." Clara, "No, it's fine. I knew. We both knew. This was always going to end badly. She wrapped her arms around herself. "I let myself forget for a while. That was stupid." "It wasn't stupid. This isn't— Clara, I care about you, more than I've cared about anything in years. But if I don't end this, she'll destroy you. Your job, your reputation, your sister's future, everything. So destroy it." Clara looked at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Fight back. Tell the truth about what your marriage really is. Walk away from all of it. And become what? I'm a duke, Clara. It's not a job I can quit. It's a responsibility to hundreds of people who depend on the Ashford estates. Tenants, workers, families who've served mine for generations. If I let Beatrice's father withdraw his support, if I let scandal tank everything, those people suffer. People who never asked to be part of this. But I did. I asked to fall in love with a married man. I asked to be the other woman in some tragic nobility drama. Fall in love. The words hung between them. Vincent crossed to her, took her face in his hands. I love you too. That's why this is impossible. Clara kissed him then, hard and desperate, like she could change reality through sheer force of will. When she pulled back, tears were streaming down her face. Go, she said, before I make this harder than it already is. Go back to your Duchess and your duty and your miserable fake life. But don't tell me you love me while you're doing it. That's too cruel, even for a duke. Clara, get out. She shoved him, not hard, but enough. Vincent stumbled back, looking at her standing there in the candlelight, beautiful and breaking, and felt something in his own chest crack clean through. He turned and left before he could change his mind, before he could promise things he couldn't deliver, before he could burn his entire life down for a love that would destroy her in the process. Behind him, he heard Clara's sob, quickly muffled. The sound followed him all the way back to his chambers, where Beatrice was waiting with triumph in her eyes, and a glass of wine she'd already poured for him, as if they were celebrating his surrender. Maybe they were. That night, Vincent dreamed of oceans he'd never sail, and a life he'd never live, and a woman he loved more than breathing. When he woke, his pillow was wet, and through the walls he could hear Beatrice already awake, already planning the next political maneuver, already moving forward like nothing had happened. Because to her, nothing had. Just another threat neutralized. Another piece moved on her father's chessboard. But in a small sewing chamber 3 floors below, Clara Whitmore sat surrounded by beautiful fabrics she'd never wear, and stitched her broken heart into a dress no one would ever see, and wondered if loving an honest man in a world built on lies had been the bravest or stupidest thing she'd ever done. And in the cold light of morning, as Vincent Ashford forced himself to eat breakfast across from a wife who'd won in a future that felt like a grave, he realized something that made his hands shake around his coffee cup. He'd made his choice, but that didn't mean he could live with it. 3 days passed like years. Vincent went through the motions, council meetings, estate reviews, dinners with Beatrice's father where Lord Harrison Thorne talked about expansion and profit margins while Vincent pushed food around his plate and wondered if this was what dying felt like. Slow, suffocating, still breathing but already gone. Beatrice watched him with the satisfaction of a general who'd won a decisive battle. She didn't gloat, didn't need to. Her victory was in every carefully orchestrated smile, Every public appearance where they stood side by side like the perfect ducal couple. Every night she retired to her separate chambers knowing he'd surrendered. But surrender didn't feel like peace. It felt like rot. Vincent stood at his chamber window on the fourth morning, watching servants move through the courtyard below, and realized he was looking for her. Clara, hoping to catch a glimpse of brown hair, a familiar walk, anything. He hadn't seen her since that night. She'd probably requested different assignments, different areas of the palace. Smart, self-preservation. The thought made him sick. Edmund entered with breakfast, set the tray down with his usual quiet efficiency. The old man had served the Ashford family for 40 years. He'd watched Vincent's father descend into the same hollow performance of nobility, watched Vincent's brother die trying to be everything their father wanted, and now he was watching Vincent become the ghost he'd always feared he'd be. "You know what's happening to you," those old eyes said without words. "And you're letting it." Vincent turned from the window. "Edmund, Your Grace, did my father love my mother?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Edmund's hand stilled on the breakfast arrangement. "That's not my place to say, Your Grace." "But you know." The valet met his eyes. "What I know is that your father made choices. Some he lived with, some that lived with him. The question isn't whether he loved her. The question is whether love mattered more than everything else he thought he needed. And what did he choose? Everything else. And it killed him long before his heart stopped." Edmund left. Vincent stared at the untouched breakfast and felt the walls closing in. He made it until noon before he broke. Check. The sewing chamber was empty when Vincent found it. Clara's tools were still there, fabric draped over the work table, but no sign of her. He stood in the middle of the room where they'd talked for hours, where she'd taught him to thread a needle, where he'd kissed her like the world could be remade through wanting it badly enough. Stupid. All of it. Stupid to think a duke could have anything real. Stupid to think love mattered against power and politics and the grinding machinery of noble obligation. Stupid to give up without a fight. The thought hit him like cold water. What the hell was he doing? Hiding in his chambers, attending dinners, playing the good duke while Clara suffered alone and Beatrice collected her victory, and his father's ghost laughed at another Ashford man choosing duty over humanity. Vincent had spent 5 years being smart, being careful, being exactly what everyone expected. And where had it gotten him? A loveless marriage, a title that felt like a noose, a life so empty that 3 weeks of honest conversation with a seamstress had been enough to make him want to burn everything down. Maybe burning it down was exactly what he should do. The door opened behind him. Vincent turned, hoping for Clara, finding instead a young maid he didn't recognize. She startled when she saw him, curtsied quickly. "Your Grace, I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was—" "Where's Clara Whitmore?" The maid's eyes went wide. "Miss Whitmore? She's been reassigned, Your Grace, to the laundry rooms in the East Wing." The laundry rooms. The hottest, hardest work in the palace. The place they sent servants they wanted to punish without officially dismissing. Beatrice is doing. Of course. "When did this happen?" 3 days ago, Your Grace, right after—" The maid trailed off, realizing she was about to say too much. "After what?" "After the Duchess spoke with the palace administrator. I'm sorry, Your Grace, I've said too much already." She fled before Vincent could ask more. He stood alone in the sewing chamber, rage building in his chest like pressure in a steam engine. Beatrice hadn't just won. She was making Clara suffer for it, grinding her down in the laundry rooms where the heat never stopped and the work destroyed hands and health and any hope of advancement. Punishment for the crime of being loved by the wrong man. Vincent left the chamber and went hunting for his wife. He found Beatrice in the palace gardens, taking tea with 3 ministers' wives. She looked perfect. She always looked perfect. Hair arranged just so, dressed the exact shade of cream that projected both elegance and modesty, smile carefully calibrated to seem warm without actually being warm. She saw him coming and something flickered in her eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or warning. Vincent didn't care. "Ladies?" He nodded to the wives. "Would you excuse us? I need a moment with my wife." The women exchanged glances, the particular look women got when they sensed drama but pretended not to. They gathered their things and left with murmured pleasantries. Beatrice waited until they were out of earshot before she spoke. "That was rude, Vincent. We were discussing the charity foundation. You reassigned Clara. I did. To the laundry rooms. Beatrice sipped her tea. She's a palace employee. The administrator saw fit to move her where she's most needed. Don't lie to me. You punished her for something I did. I protected our marriage. There's a difference. She set down her teacup with careful precision. You ended the affair, just as I asked. I held up my part of the bargain. How that woman's supervisor chooses to manage staffing is none of my concern. Beatrice, what did you expect, Vincent? That you could humiliate me and she'd face no consequences? That the world would simply ignore a servant who seduced a duke? She didn't seduce anyone. I went to her. The story doesn't care about truth. It cares about reputation. And her reputation is now exactly what it should be. Ruined enough that no one will believe anything she says about you, but not so publicly destroyed that it reflects poorly on us. Beatrice stood, smoothing her dress. I've been very generous, actually. She still has employment. Her sister's position at the orphanage school hasn't been touched. She has a future, Vincent. Just not here, and not with you. The calculation in her voice made Vincent's hands shake. This wasn't anger. This was architecture. Beatrice had engineered Clara's suffering down to the last detail, ensuring maximum punishment with minimum scandal. You're a monster. Beatrice's expression didn't change. I'm a duchess. I protect what's mine. If that makes me a monster, then every woman in my position is one too. We just have the honesty to admit it. Is that what you tell yourself? That cruelty is honesty? I tell myself that I married a man who swore vows to me in front of God and half of England, and then broke them the moment someone else made him feel special. Her control cracked, just for a second. You want to paint me as the villain, Vincent? Fine, but you're the one who betrayed our agreement. You're the one who risked everything we've built for some romantic fantasy with a woman who could never give you what you actually need. And what do I need, Beatrice? More dinners with your father? More political schemes? A life where everything real is sacrificed for appearances? You need stability, legacy, a future for the Ashford name that matters. You need exactly what I've been trying to give you since the day we married, if you'd just stop being so childish about it. Childish. The word hit like a slap. Vincent stepped closer, close enough to see the hardness in her eyes, the complete absence of anything soft or forgiving or human. I'm done. Done with what? This, you, pretending we're anything other than enemies sharing a last name. Beatrice went very still. Be careful what you say next. Or what? You'll punish me the way you punished Clara? You'll destroy more innocent people to protect your father's political games. Vincent laughed, and it tasted like ashes. Do your worst, Beatrice. I don't care anymore. You should. Her voice dropped to something cold and sharp. Because I'm not the only one who can destroy people, Vincent. You think Clara's suffering now? Imagine what happens if I tell my father you're planning something foolish. Imagine what he could do to her sister, to her entire family. The Thorns have reach beyond this palace, beyond London. We could make it so Clara Whitmore and everyone she loves spends the rest of their lives in poverty. So complete, they'd beg for the mercy of the laundry rooms. The threat landed like a knife between his ribs. Vincent stared at his wife, this beautiful, terrible woman who just calmly outlined the destruction of innocent lives like she was planning a dinner menu. You would do that? To protect my marriage? My family's reputation? Absolutely. Beatrice picked up her teacup again, the picture of aristocratic composure. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop this tantrum. You're going to attend the Windsor Ball next week with me, smile for the nobility, dance the first dance, and show everyone that we are united and strong. And in return, I'll ensure Clara Whitmore is transferred to a better position. Perhaps Lady Fairmont's estate needs a seamstress, far from London, far from you, but safe, employed, alive. She sipped her tea, waited. Vincent felt the trap close around him. Give Beatrice what she wanted, perform the perfect marriage one more time, and Clara would be safe. Refuse, fight back, try to break free, and Beatrice would destroy everyone he cared about with the efficient cruelty of someone who'd been trained since birth to win at any cost. Some choices weren't really choices. Fine. The word came out broken. I'll do it. Good. Beatrice smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. See? We can still work together when you're reasonable. Now, I need to rejoin the ladies. We're planning the charity auction for next month. Try not to have another crisis before dinner." She left him standing in the garden, surrounded by perfectly manicured roses and the wreckage of whatever foolish hope he'd been carrying. Vincent stood there until the sun began to set, until the cold seeped through his coat and into his bones, and he understood with perfect clarity what his father had known all along. The Ashford title wasn't a gift. It was a prison sentence, and he just agreed to life without parole. The next few days, Vincent moved through the palace like a ghost. He attended the required meetings, signed the necessary documents, smiled when expected. At night, he lay awake in his chambers and listened to the rain and thought about Clara in the laundry rooms, her hands raw from lye and heat, paying for the crime of making him feel human. Edmund brought him a letter on the 5th day. No seal, no signature, just a few lines in Clara's careful handwriting. "I heard about the arrangement. Thank you for protecting my sister. I understand what it cost you. Please don't try to find me again. Some loves aren't meant to survive the world we live in. I'll remember the good parts. I hope you can too." Vincent read it 3 times, then burned it in his fireplace and watched the paper curl into ash. That night, Beatrice came to his chambers. Not knocking. Never knocking anymore. "The ball is tomorrow," she said, standing in the doorway like she was addressing a subordinate. "I've had your formal wear prepared. We'll arrive together, enter together, and you'll look at me like you don't hate me for at least 3 hours. Can you manage that?" Vincent didn't turn from the fire. "Yes." "Good. My father will be there with several important votes coming up in Parliament. This is our chance to consolidate support for the railway expansion. I need you focused." I said, "Yes, Beatrice. I'm making sure you understand what yes means. Because if you embarrass me tomorrow, if you give anyone reason to think our marriage is anything less than solid, the deal is off. Clara Whitmore's future is only secure as long as you play your part." "I understand." Beatrice was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that might have been regret if she'd been capable of feeling it. "It could have been different, you know. If you just tried, if you'd seen me as a partner instead of a prison sentence." Vincent finally turned to look at her. Could it? Could it really have been different? Or were we always going to be exactly this? 2 people our families bartered like livestock, pretending obligation was the same as love. Love is a luxury, Vincent. Partnership is what survives. Then I guess we don't have either. Beatrice's jaw tightened. "Tomorrow night, don't forget." She left. Vincent returned to watching the fire consume the last traces of Clara's letter and wondered if this was what defeat felt like. Not dramatic, not tragic, just empty, mites. The Windsor Ball was everything Vincent hated about his life, concentrated into one interminable evening. 1,000 candles, 300 guests, an orchestra playing music he'd heard too many times, nobles and ministers and wealthy merchants all circling each other like sharks, looking for advantage, for leverage, for any weakness they could exploit. Beatrice was radiant. She always was at these things. She wore silver, her hair piled in elaborate curls, diamonds at her throat that cost more than Clara would make in 10 years. She smiled and laughed and worked the room like the political operative she'd been raised to be, and anyone watching would think she was the happiest Duchess in England. Vincent stood beside her, played his part, shook hands, made small talk, pretended the rage building in his chest wasn't about to crack his ribs. Lord Harrison Thorne appeared at 10 o'clock, resplendent in formal dress, his eyes sharp with predatory intelligence. He clapped Vincent on the shoulder like they were Confederates. "Vincent, excellent turnout. Just spoke with Duke Morrison. He's wavering on the railway vote. I need you to corner him, remind him how much the Ashford estates benefited from the last infrastructure project. Coming from you, it won't seem like pressure." Of course it wouldn't, because Vincent was just a tool, a title with a mouth that said what Harrison Thorne needed said. "I'll speak with him," Vincent heard himself say. "Good man. Beatrice, you look stunning. The silver was the right choice. Very queenly." Harrison winked at his daughter. "Though save the crown for when they finally make me a lord proper, eh?" He laughed at his own joke. Beatrice laughed too. Vincent felt something in his chest crack. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Beatrice turned to him expectantly. "Our dance," she said. Not a request. A reminder. Vincent led her to the floor. She was an excellent dancer. He was adequate. They moved through the steps like they'd been choreographed, which, in a sense, they had been. Every movement calculated for maximum visual impact. The perfect ducal couple. "You're doing well," Beatrice murmured as they turned. "Keep it up. Morrison is watching." "I live to serve." Sarcasm isn't attractive, Vincent. Neither is using your husband as a political puppet. Her hand tightened on his shoulder. "We're in public. Smile." Vincent smiled. It felt like dying. They completed the waltz to polite applause. Beatrice squeezed his hand once, warning or encouragement, he couldn't tell, then released him to go charm Lord Waverley's wife. Vincent watched her go, this woman he'd promised to honor, and felt nothing but contempt. For her, for himself, for every person in this ballroom who thought power mattered more than humanity. He needed air. Vincent pushed through the crowd toward the balcony, ignoring greetings and questions. The cold hit him like a blessing when he stepped outside. December wind, sharp and clean, cutting through the stuffiness of the ballroom. He wasn't alone. Clara stood at the far end of the balcony, partially hidden by shadows. She wore a simple dark dress, servant's attire, not the elaborate gowns inside, and she was staring out at the palace grounds like they held answers she couldn't quite read. Vincent's heart stopped. "Clara." She turned, and even in the darkness he could see the exhaustion in her face. The laundry rooms had left marks, rougher hands, shadows under her eyes, a thinness that came from working too hard with too little rest. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "Neither should you." "I was delivering some repaired linens to the servants' quarters. I needed to see it one more time. The ball. The world I used to work in before." She stopped. "I'm leaving tomorrow. Lady Fairmont's estate. Your wife arranged it." "I know. Did you know the work kills girls sometimes? The laundry rooms, the heat and the lie and the hours. Last year a girl collapsed and never woke up. She was 17. Vincent felt ice flood his veins. "Clara, I'm not telling you to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I need you to understand that your world doesn't just hurt people emotionally. It destroys them, physically, completely. And we're supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to be destroyed. I tried to protect you. By giving your wife exactly what she wanted. By dancing with her in there like everything's fine. By choosing your title over everything else." Clara's voice broke. "I don't blame you, Vincent. I understand the calculation. I wish you'd been honest from the beginning, that you'd told me you were never going to be brave enough to fight for this." The words hit harder than any of Beatrice's threats. Vincent crossed the balcony to her, needing her to understand, needing something. "You think I'm not fighting? Every day I don't break down is a fight. Every moment I play their game instead of burning it all down takes everything I have." "Then stop playing." Clara looked up at him, and her eyes were fierce. "Stop pretending you're trapped. You're a duke, Vincent. You have more power than most people in this country will ever have. The only thing trapping you is your own fear of what you'd lose if you actually used it." "I'd lose everything. My title? My estates? Hundreds of people depend on those estates for their livelihood. And thousands of people like me are destroyed by those same estates every day. We're the ones who work ourselves to death so you can have your balls and your political games and your comfortable prisons. So forgive me if I don't weep for what you'd lose." Vincent stared at her. "That's not fair." "Nothing's fair. That's the point." Clara stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. "Go back inside, Vincent. Dance with your wife. Protect your legacy. I'll go to Lady Fairmont's estate and spend the rest of my life sewing dresses for people who won't remember my name. And maybe someday this will feel like something other than the worst mistake of my life." "Clara, please, don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't make this harder. Just go." Vincent wanted to argue, wanted to promise things he couldn't deliver, wanted to grab her and run and damn the consequences. But he didn't, because she was right. He wasn't brave enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't enough. He turned and walked back into the ballroom, back into the light and music and performance, and left Clara alone in the cold. Inside, Beatrice found him immediately. "Where were you? Morrison is ready to talk." Vincent looked at his wife. Really looked at her, saw the calculation in every smile, the manipulation in every word, the complete absence of anything resembling love or compassion or basic human decency. And he saw himself reflected in her. The same calculation, the same fear dressed up as pragmatism, the same willingness to sacrifice anything real for the illusion of security. They deserved each other. "I'll speak with Morrison," Vincent said flatly. "Are you all right? You look—" "I'm fine. Let's just get through this." Beatrice studied him for a moment, then nodded. "After you talk to Morrison, Father wants you to approach Lord Pemberton about the canal vote. He's been difficult." Vincent didn't respond. He walked through the crowd, found Duke Morrison, said all the right things, made all the right promises, secured the vote that Harrison Thorne needed, moved on to Lord Pemberton, and did it again. He was good at this. That was the sick part. He was good at being the puppet, at saying what needed to be said, at playing the game he claimed to hate. Maybe he didn't hate it as much as he pretended. Maybe Clara was right, and he was just a coward with a title. The ball ended after midnight. Guests stumbled out to their carriages, drunk and satisfied. Harrison Thorne clasped Vincent's shoulder again, pleased with the evening's political victories. Beatrice smiled her perfect smile and accepted compliments on her dress, her grace, her obviously devoted husband. They rode back to their chambers in silence. Beatrice went straight to her room without a word. Vincent stood in the hallway between their doors and realized he'd just committed to this life. Really committed. Not just in words, but in action. He'd watched Clara walk away, had let her believe he chose his title over her, had let her be right. Inside his chamber, Vincent poured himself a drink, then another. The whiskey burned but didn't help. A knock at the door. Edmund entered, carrying tomorrow's correspondence. He took one look at Vincent's face and set down the letters carefully. "Permission to speak freely, Your Grace?" "Granted. You're making the same choice your father made, the same choice every Ashford Duke has made for 3 generations, safety over substance, legacy over life, and it's killing you the same way it killed them." Vincent stared at the old servant. "What would you have me do, Edmund? Throw away everything? Destroy the estates? Abandon my responsibilities? I'd have you ask yourself what you're actually responsible for. Because from where I stand, you've spent more time protecting your title than you've spent protecting your humanity. And a title without humanity is just a word on a gravestone." Edmund left before Vincent could respond. Vincent sat in the dark, the whiskey bottle half empty, and thought about Clara on that balcony, thought about her eyes when she told him he was choosing fear, thought about Beatrice's casual cruelty, Harrison Thorne's manipulation, the endless cycle of performance and politics and pretending any of it mattered, thought about his father, dead at 52 from a heart attack that was really just the slow suicide of living a life he hated. Thought about the graves at the Ashford Estate Cemetery, generations of dukes who'd all made the same choices for the same reasons and ended up in the same cold ground. And Vincent realized something that made his hands shake and his chest tighten and his entire world tilt sideways. He didn't want to end up there. Didn't want to die having never fought for anything real. Didn't want to look back from his deathbed and realize he'd spent his whole life being afraid. The anger that had been building for 5 years finally found its target. Not Beatrice, not Harrison Thorne, not the system or the title or the expectations. Himself. For surrendering, for hiding behind duty, for letting fear make every decision. Vincent stood up, the room spinning slightly from whiskey and revelation. He walked to his desk, pulled out paper and pen, and started writing. Not to Clara. Not yet. He'd lost the right to speak to her until he'd proven he deserved to. But to his solicitor, to his estate manager, to every person who could help him do what he should have done years ago. Dismantle the cage from the inside. The letter writing took hours. Dawn was graying the windows by the time Vincent finished the last one. His hand cramped, his head pounded. But for the first time in 5 years, he felt awake. He sealed the letters, laid them out for Edmund to post, and walked to his window. The palace grounds stretched out below, beautiful, pristine, a monument to everything he was about to tear down. Somewhere out there, Clara was packing for Lady Fairmont's estate, leaving London, leaving him, believing he'd chosen safety. She was right, he had, but that didn't mean he had to keep choosing it. Vincent pressed his palm against the cold glass and made himself a promise, not to fix everything, not to magically undo the damage, but to stop hiding. To stop using duty as an excuse for cowardice, to fight, even if he lost, even if it destroyed him, even if Clara never forgave him and Beatrice buried him in scandal, and the Ashford legacy ended with him. At least he'd go down swinging. At least he'd finally be the man she'd seen in him before he proved her wrong. The door opened behind him. Edmund, right on time with breakfast. "The letters are ready to post, Your Grace." "Good. Send them today. All of them." Edmund glanced at the sealed stack, and something that might have been approval crossed his face. "May I ask what they contain?" "War." Vincent turned from the window. "I'm done playing defense, Edmund. Time to see what happens when an Ashford Duke stops being afraid." "Your wife won't allow it." "My wife doesn't get a vote anymore." Edmund nodded slowly. "Then I suppose we'd better prepare for a siege, Your Grace. Because when a thorn realizes they're losing control, they don't surrender. They burn everything down." "Let them try." Vincent felt something sharp and dangerous unfold in his chest. "I've been burning from the inside for 5 years. Maybe it's time everyone else felt the heat." He meant it, every word. And judging by the way Edmund's eyes widened slightly, the old man knew it. The war for Vincent Ashford's soul had just begun. And this time he was done fighting on someone else's terms. The letters went out at dawn. Vincent watched from his window as Edmund personally delivered them to the postal courier. Each sealed envelope a small grenade with a delayed fuse. One to his solicitor instructing a full review of the marriage contract for any legal exit. One to his estate manager demanding a complete audit of Lord Harrison Thorne's financial entanglements with Ashford Holdings. One to a private investigator Vincent had never met, but came highly recommended for digging up the kind of dirt powerful families buried deep. And one to Clara at Lady Fairmont's estate. Not begging, not apologizing, just 7 words that felt like jumping off a cliff. "I'm done being afraid. Watch me prove it." Vincent didn't know if she'd believe him, didn't know if he deserved her belief, but the letters were sent and the war had started and there was no retreating now. He made it through breakfast before Beatrice found him. She didn't knock, just opened his chamber door like she owned it, which legally she kind of did, and stood there with a piece of paper in her hand. Her face was very pale, very controlled, the kind of controlled that came right before an explosion. Vincent set down his coffee. "Good morning." "Don't." Her voice was ice over lava. "Don't you dare pretend this is a normal morning." She threw the paper at him. It fluttered to the table. Vincent picked it up, already knowing what it was. A copy of his letter to the solicitor. Somehow intercepted, somehow read. "How did you get this? How do you think?" Beatrice stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with careful precision. "Your solicitor is Robert Blackwell. His firm has represented the Thorne family for 20 years. Did you really think he'd help you destroy a marriage that benefits his most important clients?" Vincent felt cold settle into his bones. "He sent this to you. To my father, who sent it to me with instructions to handle it quietly." Her laugh was bitter. "Quietly. As if there's a quiet way to deal with a husband planning to divorce his wife and audit her family's finances." "Then I'll find another solicitor." "You'll find they all have the same answer. No one in London will help you, Vincent. My father has spent 20 years building relationships with every law firm, every judge, every person who matters in the legal system. You're not the first noble who tried to escape a marriage. You won't be the last. But you will fail, because that's what happens when you fight people who actually know how to use power." Vincent stood slowly. "So that's it? I'm just trapped? Forever?" "You were always trapped. You were just too stupid to realize it." Beatrice moved to his desk, saw the other letters waiting to be sent, and her eyes went wide. "What else did you do?" "What I should have done 5 years ago." She grabbed the letters, reading the addresses. Estate manager, private investigator. Her hand started shaking. "You're investigating my father." "I'm investigating everyone who's been using the Ashford title as their personal piggy bank." "Vincent, you don't understand what you're doing. My father isn't just a lord. He's connected to people who make lords look powerless. Financiers, politicians, people who've built empires on knowing where the bodies are buried. If you go digging, they'll bury you instead." "Let them try." Beatrice stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "This is about her, isn't it? The seamstress? You're willing to destroy everything, your title, your reputation, your life, for some fantasy about love conquering all? I'm willing to destroy everything to stop being your puppet." "Then you're a fool." She threw the letters back on his desk. "And you're going to get people killed. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Vincent went very still. What did you say? Beatrice's expression shifted, not to regret, to something colder. Clara Whitmore left for Lady Fairmont's estate this morning. The roads between London and Surrey can be dangerous this time of year. Accidents happen, carriages overturn, travelers go missing. Vincent crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to get her complete attention. If anything happens to her... You'll what? Beatrice jerked her arm free. Kill me? Expose my father? You have no power here, Vincent. You never did. The only reason you're still Duke is because we allow it. The only reason you have anything is because we haven't taken it away yet. And if you push this, if you actually try to fight us, we'll take everything, starting with the people you care about. She meant it. Vincent could see it in her eyes. This woman he'd married, this beautiful monster his father-in-law had crafted into the perfect weapon, would destroy Clara without hesitation if it protected Thorne interests. Get out of my room! Gladly. But understand something first. Beatrice smoothed her dress, composure returning like armor. You have until tonight to withdraw these letters, apologize to my father, recommit to this marriage. Do that, and Clara Whitmore arrives safely at Lady Fairmont's estate. She lives her quiet life far from London. You live yours here. Everyone survives. Refuse, and I can't guarantee her safety, or her sisters, or anyone else foolish enough to have earned your affection. She left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Vincent stood in the middle of his chamber, rage and fear warring in his chest. He'd known Beatrice was ruthless, had known the Thornes played politics like warfare, but threatening Clara's life? Actually threatening murder to maintain control? That was a line even he hadn't expected them to cross. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Edmund appeared in the hallway like he'd been waiting. Your Grace, I wouldn't recommend... I need to get to Lady Fairmont's estate. Now, before they... I've already sent riders, Your Grace. 3 of them, different routes, all instructed to ensure Miss Whitmore's safe arrival. Edmund's expression was grim. But I should tell you something. The investigator you hired, Marcus Brennan, what about him? He sent a preliminary report this morning, before your wife intercepted the solicitor's letter. Edmund pulled a folded paper from his coat. You'll want to read this somewhere private. They went back into Vincent's chamber. He locked the door, broke the seal on Brennan's report, and started reading. With every line, the floor seemed to drop further beneath him. Harrison Thorne wasn't just connected to the Ashford finances. He'd been systematically embezzling from the estate for 5 years. Not huge amounts, that would have been noticed, but steady, consistent bleeding. Tens of thousands of pounds funneled into shell companies and false investments. The railway expansion that was supposed to benefit everyone. Mostly benefited a Thorne-owned construction company. The canal vote they'd fought so hard for would line Thorne pockets while leaving the actual waterway underfunded and half-built. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the date on the marriage contract. Vincent had always assumed his father had arranged the marriage to Beatrice shortly before his death as a way to secure the family's political position. He'd been wrong. The contract had been signed 3 months before Vincent's brother died, before Vincent was supposed to inherit anything, which meant the marriage wasn't about political alliance at all. It was about making sure that when Vincent's brother conveniently died in a riding accident, the Ashford fortune would fall into Thorne hands through Vincent's inevitable inheritance. Vincent read the paragraph 3 times before the implications really hit. They'd planned it. The whole thing. His brother's death. Vincent's forced inheritance. The marriage to Beatrice. Everything had been orchestrated to transfer Ashford wealth and title into Thorne control. And Vincent had been the perfect mark. Too devastated by his brother's death to question the marriage contract. Too overwhelmed by sudden responsibility to investigate the finances. Too broken to fight back. Until now. Vincent set down the report with shaking hands. My brother. Edmund's silence was answer enough. They killed him. Harrison Thorne killed my brother to get to me. The investigator has no proof, Your Grace. Only timing and motive. A riding accident is nearly impossible to prove as murder years after the fact. But you believe it. Edmund met his eyes. I believe powerful men do terrible things to get what they want. And I believe your brother was an excellent rider who'd never have been thrown by the horse that allegedly killed him. The rage that Vincent had been building for weeks suddenly found perfect clarity. Not hot anger, cold, precise. The kind of fury that didn't explode but calcified into something harder than stone. They'd murdered his brother, stolen his fortune, trapped him in a marriage designed to bleed him dry. And now they were threatening Clara because he'd finally found the spine to fight back. Enough. Vincent stood. I need to see Lord Chancellor Pemberton. Your Grace, if you go to the authorities with this, the Thorns will know immediately. They have people everywhere. I'm not going to the authorities. I'm going to someone worse. Vincent grabbed his coat. Someone Harrison Thorne has been trying to bribe for years without success. Someone who hates corruption more than he loves power. Edmund's eyes widened. Lord Pemberton is notoriously difficult. He might not even see you. He'll see me, because I'm about to offer him something he wants more than money. Vincent headed for the door. The complete destruction of Harrison Thorne's political career. Lord Chancellor William Pemberton lived in a townhouse that managed to be both elegant and austere, the architectural equivalent of the man himself. Vincent was shown into a study lined with law books and devoid of the usual noble excess. Pemberton himself sat behind a massive oak desk, white-haired and sharp-eyed, looking at Vincent like a judge assessing a defendant. Duke Ashford, I don't recall scheduling an appointment. You didn't, Lord Chancellor. I apologize for the intrusion, but I have information I think you'll want to hear. If this is about the canal vote, I've already told Thorne I won't be bought. It's not about the canal vote. It's about why Harrison Thorne has been trying to buy you in the first place. Vincent set Brennan's report on the desk, and about the illegal activities he's been using my family's name to cover. Pemberton didn't pick up the report immediately. Making accusations against a man of Lord Thorne's standing is dangerous, Your Grace, especially when that man is your father-in-law. I know. I'm making them anyway. Something shifted in Pemberton's expression. He picked up the report and began reading. The silence stretched for several minutes while Vincent stood there, knowing this was the moment everything either broke his way or destroyed him completely. Finally, Pemberton set down the report. If this is accurate, and that's a significant if, you're talking about systematic fraud, embezzlement, and possibly conspiracy to commit murder. I'm talking about a man who's been using his daughter's marriage to a duke as cover for crimes that would send any common man to prison for life. And you want me to investigate. I want you to help me expose him before he destroys more lives. Vincent leaned forward. I know you've spent your career fighting corruption in Parliament. I know you've turned down bribes from every powerful family in London. I'm offering you the chance to take down the most corrupt of them all. Pemberton studied him. What's in it for you? Beyond justice, which I suspect isn't your primary motivation. I want out of my marriage. I want control of my own estate. And I want to make sure the man who murdered my brother faces consequences. Even if those consequences destroy your wife? Vincent thought about Beatrice, about her cold threats and colder eyes, about 5 years of manipulation and cruelty dressed up as duty. My wife knew exactly what her father was. She's been complicit from the beginning. If she burns with him, so be it. Pemberton nodded slowly. You understand that if we pursue this, there's no going back. The scandal will touch you too. The Ashford name will be dragged through every newspaper in England. You might lose the title anyway, simply from association. I don't care about the title anymore. I care about being free. And the seamstress? Clara Whitmore? Vincent's head snapped up. How do you... I make it my business to know things, Your Grace, including which dukes are having affairs with palace servants and which wives are threatening said servants with mysterious accidents. Pemberton's expression was granite. If you're doing this for her, you should know she's already in danger. Harrison Thorne doesn't leave loose ends. Which is why I need your help, now, before he makes good on his threats. Pemberton stood, walking to his window. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man about to make a decision that would shake the foundations of English nobility. I'll investigate. Quietly. If I find proof of even half of what's in this report, I'll bring charges. But you need to understand something, Duke Ashford. Men like Harrison Thorne don't go down easy. He'll fight with everything he has. He'll destroy reputations, call in favors, maybe even resort to violence. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared to do whatever it takes. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. Pemberton turned from the window. Then we have an agreement. I'll start the investigation immediately. But you need to be smart. Go home. Act normal. Give no indication you've spoken to me. Let Thorne think he's won. And Clara? I'll have men watching her route to Surrey. If anyone tries to interfere with her travel, they'll be stopped. Pemberton extended his hand. You're either very brave or very foolish, Your Grace. Possibly both. Vincent shook his hand. I've been foolish for 5 years, Lord Chancellor. Brave is a nice change. Oi. Vincent returned to the palace as evening fell, his mind racing with possibilities and plans. He'd done it. Actually started the process of tearing down the Thorne Empire. If Pemberton found what Vincent thought he'd find, Harrison would face criminal charges. Beatrice would be destroyed by association. The marriage would dissolve in scandal. And Vincent would finally be free. He made it to his chambers before he saw Edmund waiting in the hallway, and the expression on the old man's face made Vincent's stomach drop. What happened? Your wife, Your Grace. She's called an emergency family meeting. You, her, and Lord Thorne. In the drawing room, now. Vincent's blood went cold. She knows I went to Pemberton. I don't know what she knows, Your Grace, but she's been in her chambers for the last 3 hours with her father, and the palace administrator dismissed half the staff for the evening. Whatever's about to happen, they want it private. Vincent wanted to run, wanted to grab a horse and ride to Surrey and get Clara and disappear. But running now would only confirm guilt, would only give them the excuse they needed to destroy everything. He had to face this. Stay close, Edmund. If things go badly, I need you to get a message to Lord Pemberton. Tell him to move up the investigation timeline. Your Grace, just promise me. Edmund nodded grimly. Vincent straightened his coat, squared his shoulders, and walked into the drawing room like he was walking to the gallows. Beatrice and Harrison Thorne waited inside. His wife stood by the fireplace, still in her day dress, her expression unreadable. Harrison sat in Vincent's favorite chair, a deliberate insult, smoking a cigar like he owned the palace, which Vincent was beginning to realize he probably thought he did. Vincent? Harrison didn't stand, didn't offer any of the usual pleasantries. Sit down, we need to talk. I'd rather stand. That wasn't a request. Vincent remained standing. Harrison's eyes narrowed, but he continued anyway. My daughter tells me you've been making inquiries, hiring investigators, asking uncomfortable questions about our family's financial arrangements. Your daughter has always been well informed. Don't be clever, boy. It doesn't suit you. Harrison tapped ash from his cigar. I've spent 5 years cleaning up your father's mess, turning the Ashford estates from bankruptcy into profitability, making your title mean something again. And this is how you repay me? By accusing me of theft? I'm accusing you of exactly what you are. A fraud who murdered my brother and married me to your daughter to steal my inheritance. The words fell like bombs. Beatrice went very pale. Harrison's expression didn't change at all, which was somehow more terrifying. That's quite an accusation, Harrison said quietly. Do you have proof? I have enough. No, you don't. Harrison stood slowly, and Vincent realized the man was taller than he'd seemed, broader, more physically imposing. Because if you had real proof, you'd have gone to the authorities already instead of coming home to your wife like a dog with its tail between its legs. I did go to the authorities. This afternoon, Lord Pemberton has everything. The lie came out smooth and confident. Vincent watched Harrison's face for any reaction, any tell. What he saw was worse than anger. Harrison Thorne smiled. William Pemberton. Yes, I thought you might go to him. Incorruptible Pemberton, the Lord Chancellor who can't be bought. Harrison pulled a folded letter from his coat pocket. Is this the meeting you're referring to? He tossed it to Vincent. It landed at his feet. Vincent picked it up with hands that had started to shake. Broke the seal. Started reading. It was from Pemberton. Addressed to Harrison Thorne, dated 2 hours ago. Lord Thorne, Duke Ashford visited me this afternoon with allegations regarding your financial dealings. I wanted to inform you personally that I found his claims unsubstantiated and have no intention of pursuing investigation. The report he provided appears to be fabricated by a disreputable investigator with a history of fraud. I thought you should know that your son-in-law is attempting to undermine your reputation with false evidence. Regards, Lord Chancellor William Pemberton. Vincent read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Pemberton had betrayed him, had taken Vincent's information directly to Harrison, had called Brennan's report fabricated. But that didn't make sense. Pemberton's reputation for integrity was legendary. He turned down fortunes from men more powerful than Harrison Thorne. Unless... Vincent looked up at Harrison and the man's smile widened. "You're wondering how I bought him," Harrison said. "The answer is, I didn't. I bought his son 10 years ago. Put the boy through Oxford, set him up with a lucrative position in my shipping company, made him wealthy enough that Lord Pemberton's pension will look like pocket change by comparison. And when William Pemberton retires, which he'll do next year, his son will be financially secure. Unless, of course, the father does something stupid like investigate me. Then the son loses everything. His position, his wealth, his future." Vincent felt the floor disappear beneath him. "You're lying." "I'm pragmatic. There's a difference." Harrison moved closer. "Every powerful man in London has a weakness, Vincent. Pemberton's weakness is his son. Your weakness is romantic delusion, and your brother's weakness was thinking he could stand up to me when I wanted access to the Ashford fortune." The admission hung in the air like a confession. "You killed him." "I removed an obstacle." Harrison's voice was casual. "Charles was never going to marry Beatrice. He saw right through her, right through me. So I arranged an accident and waited for you to inherit. You, the second son who never wanted to be Duke. The perfect mark. Grief-stricken. Overwhelmed. Desperate for guidance. All I had to do was offer structure and stability through my daughter. And you signed over your life without even reading the fine print." Vincent's hands clenched into fists. "I'll destroy you." "With what? Evidence from a disgraced investigator? Testimony from a Lord Chancellor who just called you a liar? No one will believe you, Vincent, and if you try to make them believe, I'll start by killing Clara Whitmore. Then her sister. Then everyone else you've ever cared about. And you'll watch it happen, helpless, while remaining legally bound to my daughter for the rest of your miserable life." Beatrice finally spoke. "Father, please, quiet." Harrison didn't even look at her. "Your husband needs to understand how this works. He seems to think he has power here. He doesn't. The only power in this room belongs to me." Something in Vincent broke then. Not into pieces, but into something harder. He'd been afraid for so long. Afraid of scandal. Afraid of losing his title. Afraid of the consequences of fighting back. But Harrison Thorne standing there admitting to murder while threatening everyone Vincent loved? Fear didn't matter anymore. "You're right," Vincent said quietly. "I don't have power. I don't have proof you'll accept. I don't have allies you haven't already bought. But I have one thing you didn't account for." "And what's that?" "Nothing left to lose." Vincent turned and walked out of the drawing room. Behind him, Harrison called out something, a threat or a command. But Vincent didn't stop, didn't turn around, just kept walking through the palace halls, faster and faster, until he was nearly running. Edmund appeared from somewhere. "Your Grace? Get my horse, now, and pack everything we need to travel light. Where are we going?" "Surrey. To get Clara before they do, and then—" Vincent stopped, the full weight of what he was about to do settling on his shoulders. "And then we're burning it all down. Your Grace, if you run, they'll call it guilt. They'll seize the estates, strip your title. Let them." Vincent grabbed Edmund's shoulders. "I'm done playing their game. My brother died trying to fight them honorably, and all it got him was a grave. I'm not making the same mistake." Understanding crossed Edmund's face. "You're going to do something they can't ignore. I'm going to do something that destroys us all. Them, me, the Ashford name, everything. Because if I can't have my life back, I'll make damn sure they can't have theirs either." Edmund hesitated only a moment. Then he nodded. "I'll get the horses, Your Grace, and I'm coming with you." "Edmund, you don't have to. Your father was a coward who died regretting every choice he made. Your brother was brave and they murdered him for it. You're the first Ashford in 3 generations who might actually win this fight. I'll be damned if I miss it." They made it to the stables in under 10 minutes. Edmund had already saddled 2 horses and packed saddlebags with supplies. Smart. Prepared. Vincent was swinging himself into the saddle when Beatrice appeared. She looked different somehow, smaller, or maybe Vincent was just seeing her clearly for the first time. A woman who'd sold herself to her father's ambitions and couldn't figure out how to buy herself back. "Don't do this," she said. "Give me one reason why not." "Because—" She stopped. Started again. "Because he'll kill her, Vincent. If you run, if you take Clara, he'll hunt you both down and make you watch her die before he kills you too. Then I'll die fighting, better than dying the way I've been living." "What about me?" The question surprised him. Vincent looked at his wife, this woman he'd never loved but had promised to honor, and tried to find some sympathy, some regret. There wasn't any. "You chose your father over everything else, over decency, over humanity, over the possibility of something real. That's on you, Beatrice. Live with it." He spurred his horse forward. Behind him, Beatrice called out one last time. "He has men on every road to Surrey. You'll never make it." Vincent didn't answer, just rode harder. Because the thing about having nothing left to lose was it made you dangerous in ways powerful men never anticipated. Harrison Thorne had built an empire on controlling people through fear, through leverage, through knowing exactly what they'd sacrifice to protect what they loved. But Vincent wasn't protecting anymore. He was attacking. And men like Harrison Thorne, for all their power and connections and carefully constructed webs of influence, had one fatal weakness. They thought everyone else played by the same rules. Vincent Ashford was done with rules. The winter wind bit at his face as he rode through the night toward Surrey, toward Clara, toward a confrontation that would end either in freedom or death. He didn't care which anymore, as long as Harrison Thorne burned with him. The road to Surrey cut through darkness like a blade through silk. Vincent drove his horse harder than he should have, harder than was safe. But safety had stopped mattering somewhere around the 3rd mile when he'd accepted that this night would end either in blood or freedom, and possibly both. Edmund rode beside him, the old man proving himself a better horseman than Vincent had given him credit for, keeping pace without complaint even as the winter cold turned their breath to fog and their hands to ice around the reins. They'd been riding for 2 hours when Vincent saw the first rider. A shadow on the road ahead, barely visible in the moonlight. Then another. Then 3 more materializing from the tree line like ghosts with specific instructions. Vincent pulled his horse to a halt. Edmund did the same, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol he'd brought. 5 men blocked the road, all wearing dark coats, all sitting their horses with the kind of casual confidence that came from knowing they had numbers and orders and the full weight of Harrison Thorne's money behind them. The man in front urged his horse forward a few paces. Big, scarred face, the kind of hired muscle that did the jobs wealthy men didn't want traced back to themselves. "Duke Ashford." His voice was gravel and East London slums poorly hidden under attempted refinement. "I'm afraid this road is closed tonight." Vincent's hand tightened on his reins. "By whose authority?" "By the authority of the man paying me to make sure you don't reach Surrey." The man smiled, showing teeth that had seen too many fights. "Turn around, go back to London. No one needs to get hurt." "And if I refuse?" "Then someone definitely gets hurt. Probably you. Possibly your man there. Lord Thorne was very specific about wanting you alive, but he didn't say anything about undamaged." There were rules to this kind of confrontation. Vincent had been raised understanding them. The nobleman accepts he's outmatched, makes a strategic retreat, lives to fight another day through legal channels and political maneuvering. The civilized approach. The smart approach. The approach that had gotten his brother killed and himself trapped for 5 years. Vincent reached into his coat slowly. The hired men tensed, hands moving to their own weapons. But what Vincent pulled out wasn't a pistol. It was a leather purse heavy with gold coins. £50 to each of you, Vincent said, holding it up. To ride away right now and forget you saw me." The scarred man laughed. "Lord Thorne's paying us 100 each, and he's got a reputation for hunting down people who cross him. You're outbid, your grace." "Then let me make a different offer." Vincent dropped the purse back in his coat. "I'm going through this road whether you move or not. You can try to stop me and discover that a desperate duke is considerably more dangerous than you anticipated, or you can let me pass and tell Harrison Thorne you never saw me. He'll be angry, but at least you'll be alive to experience his anger." The scarred man's smile faded. "You threatening us?" "I'm informing you. There's a difference." One of the other riders shifted nervously. "Jack, maybe we should—" "Shut it!" Jack kept his eyes on Vincent. "You're one man, Your Grace. Well-bred, soft-handed, probably never thrown a real punch in your life. You really think you're getting past 5 of us?" Vincent felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. The old Vincent would have been terrified right now. Would have calculated odds and recognized impossibility and retreated to fight through proper channels. But the old Vincent had died somewhere in that drawing room when Harrison Thorne admitted to murdering his brother. What was left wasn't civilized anymore. "Edmund," Vincent said quietly, "when this starts, ride hard. Don't stop. Get to Clara." "Your Grace, I'm not leaving." "That's an order." Vincent spurred his horse forward before Edmund could argue, before the hired men could react, before his own survival instinct could overrule what was left of his rage. He drove straight at Jack, his horse colliding with the other man's mount hard enough to send both animals staggering. Jack grabbed for Vincent, caught his coat, started to drag him from the saddle. Vincent twisted, drove his elbow into the man's scarred face, felt bone crunch under the impact. Jack roared, lost his grip. Vincent kicked him hard in the chest, sent him tumbling backward off his horse. The other 4 rushed in. Vincent had never been a fighter, had taken fencing lessons as a boy, learned to box like any gentleman, but actual combat, the kind where men tried to genuinely hurt each other, he was hopelessly outmatched. But being outmatched only mattered if you cared about surviving. Vincent didn't. He fought like an animal, dirty, desperate, using his horse as a weapon, driving it into the others, forcing them back. Someone grabbed his arm. He bit down hard on their hand, tasted blood, kept biting until they screamed and let go. Another man pulled him halfway from his saddle. Vincent grabbed the man's coat, dragged him down with him, both of them hitting the frozen road hard enough to knock the wind from Vincent's lungs. They rolled. Vincent ended up on bottom. The hired man's fist connected with his jaw, then his ribs, then his jaw again. Pain exploded through Vincent's head, sharp and clarifying. He reached up blindly, found the man's eyes, pressed his thumbs in hard. The man screamed, jerked back. Vincent surged up, drove his forehead into the man's nose. More blood. More pain. Everything was blood and pain and the winter night spinning around him. He made it to his feet. Someone hit him from behind, sent him sprawling. He rolled, came up, saw Edmund still on his horse, the old man having ignored orders and drawn his pistol. The shot cracked through the night. One of the hired men clutched his shoulder and fell. That gave Vincent the second he needed. He grabbed his horse's reins, hauled himself into the saddle despite his ribs screaming and his vision swimming. Jack was back up, blood streaming from his nose, reaching for Vincent's leg. Vincent kicked him in the face. Then he rode. Edmund followed, both of them driving their horses into a gallop that left the remaining hired men scrambling for their mounts. Behind them, Jack's voice rose in fury, ordering pursuit. Vincent didn't look back, just rode harder, every breath sending knives through his damaged ribs, his jaw swelling, his hands bloody from God knew whose face. He'd won. Barely, stupidly, with more luck than skill. But he'd won. And somewhere in the violence and pain and desperate forward momentum, Vincent realized something that would have terrified him a week ago. He was good at this, at fighting when the rules didn't matter anymore, at surviving when survival required becoming something his father would have been ashamed of. Maybe that's what it took to beat men like Harrison Thorne. Not honor, not law, not playing the game better than they did, just the willingness to burn the whole game down and everyone in it. Edmund pulled alongside him. "Your Grace, you're bleeding." "Doesn't matter." "How far to Lady Fairmont's estate?" "Another hour, maybe less if we kill the horses getting there." "Then kill them." They rode. Lady Fairmont's estate appeared through the darkness like something from a storybook. Sprawling manor house, manicured gardens even in winter, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Vincent and Edmund approached at a pace that was more controlled collapse than controlled approach, their horses lathered and shaking. A servant met them at the gate, took one look at Vincent's bloody face, and immediately called for the house steward. "I need to see Clara Whitmore," Vincent said before anyone could ask questions. "Now. It's urgent." The steward appeared, middle-aged and officious, clearly torn between Vincent's title and his alarming appearance. "Your Grace, Miss Whitmore retired hours ago. Perhaps in the morning. There won't be a morning if I don't see her now. Where is she? Something in Vincent's voice must have convinced him this wasn't a request. The steward led them through the manor to a servant's wing, stopped at a plain wooden door, knocked gently. Miss Whitmore? Terribly sorry, but there's a situation. The door opened. Clara stood there in a simple nightdress, her hair loose around her shoulders, sleep-confused expression shifting rapidly to shock when she saw Vincent. What happened to your face? 5 of Harrison Thorne's men on the Surrey Road. Had to convince them to let me pass. Vincent swayed slightly, Edmund's hand steadying him. We need to leave. Right now. They'll send more. Clara pulled him into the small room, closed the door on the bewildered steward. Her hands moved over Vincent's face with professional efficiency, checking the damage. You're concussed, possibly fractured jaw. Your ribs. Don't matter. Clara, listen to me. Harrison Thorne killed my brother. He's been stealing from the Ashford estates for years. He threatened to kill you if I didn't back down. The words tumbled out faster than he could organize them. I went to Lord Pemberton for help, and Thorne owns him too. Owns everyone. The whole system is corrupted and I can't fight it legally, so I'm going to destroy it illegally, and I need you to come with me, or get somewhere safe because they're coming and I won't let them hurt you. Clara stared at him. You're not making sense. I'm making perfect sense. For the first time in my life, I'm making perfect sense. I've spent 5 years being reasonable, and it got me nowhere. So I'm done being reasonable. I'm going to burn Harrison Thorne's empire to the ground, and I'm probably going to die doing it, but I needed to see you first because... Vincent stopped, his breath catching painfully in his damaged ribs. Because I love you, and I needed you to know that before everything ends. The silence stretched between them. Clara's hand was still on his jaw, gentle despite everything. When she spoke, her voice was soft. You're an idiot. I know. You can't fight the entire English nobility. I know. You're going to lose everything, your title, your estates, possibly your life. I know. And you came here anyway. I came here because of anyway. Vincent caught her hand. I'm not asking you to join this. I'm not asking you to risk anything. I just needed to make sure you were safe before I... Clara kissed him, hard, desperate, like she was trying to transfer courage through contact. When she pulled back, her eyes were fierce. You're still an idiot, but you're my idiot. She turned to her small trunk, started pulling out clothes. How long do we have? Clara, no, you can't. Can't what? Let you ride off and get yourself killed? Watch you fight alone because you're too noble to drag anyone else down with you? She dressed quickly, efficiently, years of early mornings making her movements automatic. I've spent my whole life being safe, Vincent, being quiet, taking whatever treatment the nobility decided to give me because fighting back meant losing everything. But you know what I realized watching you ride away from the palace? Safe isn't the same as alive. She grabbed a cloak, faced him fully. So if you're burning it all down, I'm bringing matches. Vincent wanted to argue, wanted to protect her. But looking at Clara standing there with fire in her eyes and determination in every line of her body, he realized she didn't need his protection. She needed his partnership. We ride for London, Vincent said. There's something I need to get from the Ashford townhouse. Evidence my brother collected before he died. He suspected Thorne was corrupt, but died before he could prove it. Edmund appeared in the doorway. Your Grace, riders approaching. At least 10 of them. Vincent's jaw tightened despite the pain. They sent reinforcements. We need to go now. They made it to the horses as the first of Harrison's men appeared at the estate gates. Lady Fairmont's steward was arguing with them, insisting on propriety and proper hours, buying precious seconds. Vincent, Clara, and Edmund rode hard for the tree line, taking a servant's path that wound through the estate grounds toward the main road. Behind them, shouts, the sound of horses in pursuit. They crashed through underbrush, branches whipping at faces and clothes. Clara rode like she'd been born to it, low over her horse's neck, keeping pace with Vincent despite his better mount. Edmund brought up the rear, his pistol ready. They burst onto the main road just as Harrison's men broke through behind them. 8 riders, maybe more. All of them fresher than Vincent's group, their horses not already exhausted from the London to Surrey run. They're gaining! Edmund shouted. Vincent looked back, saw the gap closing, knew they wouldn't make it to London before being overtaken. Knew this chase was going to end badly unless he changed the parameters. There was a ravine ahead, Vincent had ridden this road before in better times, knew the terrain. The main road curved around it safely, adding distance. But there was a straight shot across if you were willing to jump the 12-foot gap. Willing or desperate enough. "Follow me!" Vincent veered left, off the road toward the ravine. Behind him, Claire didn't hesitate. Edmund cursed but followed. Vincent hit the edge at full gallop and felt his horse gather itself. The moment of flight seemed to stretch forever, just man and animal and empty air and the rocks below waiting to break both. Then impact, his horse landing hard on the far side, stumbling but staying up. Clara landed beside him a second later. Then Edmund. Behind them, Harrison's men pulled up short at the edge. Too cautious, too sane. They'd have to take the long way around. Vincent allowed himself a grim smile despite his swollen face. Sometimes being crazy is an advantage. They rode. They reached the Ashford London townhouse just before dawn. The building stood dark and empty. Vincent had given the staff leave months ago, unable to afford maintaining 2 households. Now the neglect served him. No witnesses, no one to report to Harrison that the Duke had returned. Vincent led them through the servants' entrance, up back stairs to his late brother's old study. Everything was exactly as Charles had left it 4 years ago. Books, papers. A life interrupted mid-sentence. Vincent went straight to the desk, pulled out the bottom drawer, felt for the false bottom he'd discovered years ago and never investigated. His fingers found the catch. The panel lifted. Inside lay a leather journal and a stack of letters. Vincent opened the journal, saw his brother's handwriting. Entries dating back 6 years. Notes about irregular payments. Questions about Thorne investments. Suspicions about the marriage contract. The last entry was dated 3 days before Charles died. "Harrison Thorne is stealing from us. I have proof. Meeting with Lord Waverley tomorrow to discuss legal action. If something happens to me, Vincent needs to know. The marriage contract is a trap. Don't sign it. Don't trust Thorne. Don't..." The entry ended mid-sentence. Unfinished because Charles had died before he could finish it. Murdered before he could expose what he'd found. Vincent's hand shook as he read. All this time, the evidence had been here. In this desk. In his brother's handwriting. Proof that Charles had known, had tried to stop it, had died for the attempt. And Vincent had signed the contract anyway, too grief-stricken to question, too overwhelmed to investigate. "Vincent," Clara's voice was gentle. "What does it say?" He showed her, showed Edmund, watched them read the words that condemned Harrison Thorne more thoroughly than any investigator's report. "This is it," Edmund said quietly. "This is what we need. Your brother's journal, in his own hand, documenting everything. No judge could ignore this." Yes, they could. Vincent set down the journal carefully. Because Harrison owns the judges, owns the magistrates, owns everyone who'd need to see this for it to matter. That's what I've learned. The system isn't broken. The system is working exactly as designed, to protect men like Harrison Thorne and destroy men like my brother. "Then what do we do?" Clara asked. Vincent looked at her, at Edmund, at these 2 people who'd risked everything to follow him into this madness. And he realized there was only one way to win a rigged game. Stop playing by the rules entirely. "We don't take this to judges," Vincent said slowly. "We take it to the people. We publish it. Every newspaper in London, every scandal sheet. We make it so public that Harrison can't buy silence. Make it so widespread that even his connections can't contain it." "That will destroy you too," Edmund said. "The scandal will touch the Ashford name. Everything your family built, my family built their legacy on the backs of people like Clara. On the suffering of tenants and servants and everyone without a title to protect them. If that legacy has to burn to stop Harrison Thorne, then let it burn. At least it'll burn for something that matters." Clara took his hand. "When do we start?" "Now." Vincent gathered the journal and letters. "I know an editor at the London Chronicle, man named Thomas Blackwood. He's spent his career trying to expose corruption in the nobility. This is exactly the kind of story he's been waiting for." They made it halfway down the stairs before they heard the front door crash open. Vincent froze. Below them, footsteps. Multiple people. Moving through the townhouse with the confidence of men who had permission to be there, or who didn't care about permission. A voice echoed up from the ground floor. Familiar, cold, aristocratic. Harrison Thorne. "I know you're here, Vincent. Saw your horses outside. Rather sloppy for a man supposedly trying to hide. Footsteps on the stairs now, coming up. You've made this significantly more complicated than it needed to be. But I suppose that's what happens when sentiment overrules common sense. Vincent looked at Clara and Edmund. The back stairs were cut off. The front was Harrison. They were trapped in the middle with evidence that could destroy a lord and no way out. Sometimes there was no clever escape, no brilliant plan, just the moment of decision that defined everything that came after. Vincent handed the journal to Clara. The window at the end of the hall leads to a balcony, then the garden. Take this to Thomas Blackwood at the Chronicle. Tell him everything. What about you? I'm going to buy you time. Vincent, no. I'm not being noble, I'm being practical. He kissed her hard. Someone has to make sure Harrison doesn't follow you, and I've got 5 years of rage that needs an outlet. Edmund grabbed Vincent's arm. Your Grace, you can't fight him alone. I'm not planning to fight him. I'm planning to destroy him. Vincent's smile was sharp despite his swollen jaw. There's a difference. He pushed them toward the window, watched Clara climb out onto the balcony with Edmund helping her down. The journal was safe. The evidence was safe. That was what mattered. Vincent turned to face the stairs as Harrison Thorne appeared at the top, flanked by 4 men who looked like they specialized in making problems disappear. Harrison took in Vincent's battered appearance with something like amusement. You look terrible, my boy. Been fighting again? How unbecoming for a duke. Your men on the Surrey Road would agree. The ones still conscious, anyway. Yes, I heard about that unfortunate encounter, which is why I brought better help this time. Harrison gestured to the men beside him. Ex-military, very professional. They won't make the mistake of underestimating you. Vincent's hand moved to his coat pocket. Not for a weapon. For the one thing he'd grabbed from his brother's desk before they'd fled downstairs. A single piece of paper. The original marriage contract between Beatrice Thorne and Charles Ashford, signed 6 months before Charles died. Proof that Harrison had planned this from the beginning. You killed him for this, Vincent said, holding up the contract. Murdered my brother because he wouldn't marry your daughter and give you access to our fortune. Harrison's expression didn't change. Your brother was stubborn, idealistic. He would have wasted the Ashford legacy on principles that don't pay dividends. I did him a favor, really. And you. Look how much we've accomplished together. You call embezzlement and corruption accomplishment? I call it efficiency. The aristocracy is dying, Vincent. Slowly being bled dry by taxation and democracy and the ridiculous notion that common people should have a say in how they're governed. I'm simply ensuring that when it falls, men like me are positioned to survive the collapse. Your brother didn't understand that. You barely understand it. But it doesn't matter what you understand because you're going to die tonight anyway. The 4 men moved forward. Vincent backed toward the study, knowing he was outmatched, knowing this was probably where it ended. But if he was dying anyway, he was taking Harrison's empire with him. Before your men killed me, Vincent said, you should know that journal you're trying to retrieve? My brother's documentation of all your crimes? It's not in this house anymore. Neither is Clara Whitmore. They're both on their way to the London Chronicle right now. By morning, every newspaper in England will know what you are. Harrison's face went white. You're lying. Am I? Check the desk. See if the journal's there. See if I'm bluffing. One of the men moved into the study, searched the desk, came back shaking his head. Harrison's control cracked for the first time Vincent had ever seen. Find the girl. Find that journal. Now. The men rushed downstairs. Harrison stood alone with Vincent in the hallway, and for a moment they were just 2 men stripped of pretense and title and the games they'd been playing. You've destroyed yourself, Harrison said quietly. You know that, don't you? Even if you expose me, the scandal touches you too. The Ashford name becomes synonymous with corruption. Your estates will be seized, your title stripped, you'll have nothing. I'll have my freedom. That's more than I had when I was your puppet. Freedom? Harrison laughed, bitter and sharp. You're a duke, Vincent. You were never meant to be free. None of us are. We're prisoners of our own legacy, our own names, our own ambitions. The only choice is whether we accept that prison or destroy ourselves fighting it. Then I choose destruction. Vincent lunged. Not at Harrison. The old lord would expect that. At the ornate vase on the table beside them. He grabbed it, threw it through the hallway window. Glass exploded outward. Cold air rushed in, and the crash was loud enough to wake the entire street. Lights appeared in neighboring townhouses. Servants emerged to investigate. Within seconds, witnesses, dozens of them, all watching as Vincent Ashford, Duke of Ashford, stood bleeding and defiant in his townhouse hallway with Lord Harrison Thorne and clear evidence of a struggle. Harrison understood immediately. His face went rigid. "You've just signed your own death warrant." "Maybe, but I've signed yours too, and that's good enough." Shouts from outside. Someone had called for the constable. Harrison's men returned from their failed search for Clara, took in the broken window and gathering crowd, understood the situation had become impossible. "We need to leave, my lord," one of them said urgently. Harrison didn't move, just stared at Vincent with hatred so pure it was almost physical. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." Harrison Thorne turned and left, his men following. But the look in his eyes promised violence, promised retribution, promised that whatever came next would be uglier than anything that had come before. Vincent stood in the wreckage of his townhouse, listening to the constable's approach, and felt something that might have been triumph or might have been terror. He'd done it, actually done it. Set in motion the destruction of Harrison Thorne's empire and his own legacy in the same desperate gambit. Now he just had to survive long enough to see it through. The constable entered, took in Vincent's battered appearance in the broken window, and Vincent realized the final battle was just beginning. Because exposing corruption was easy compared to surviving the consequences. The constable was a weathered man named Davies, who'd seen enough of nobility's private wars to recognize one in progress. He took in Vincent's battered face, the broken window, the obvious signs of recent violence, and his expression settled into the kind of careful neutrality law enforcement developed when dealing with powerful people who could destroy careers with a word. "Your Grace," Davies said slowly, "there have been reports of a disturbance, concerned neighbors. Would you care to explain what's happened here?" Vincent could have lied, could have claimed an accident, dismissed the whole thing as a misunderstanding. That's what nobility did. Used their titles as shields, their wealth as weapons, made problems disappear through careful application of money and influence. But Vincent was done being that kind of noble. "I was attacked," he said simply, "by men working for Lord Harrison Thorne. They came to steal evidence of his crimes against my family. I fought back." Davies's eyes widened slightly. Accusing a lord in front of witnesses wasn't done. Not by someone who wanted to keep their position in society. "That's a serious allegation, Your Grace. It's a serious crime. My brother was murdered 4 years ago on Thorne's orders. I have documentation, proof, all of it being delivered to the press as we speak because the legal system is too corrupt to handle it." The constable looked like he'd just been handed a live grenade. Behind him, the gathered neighbors whispered among themselves, scandal already spreading like wildfire. This would be all over London by breakfast, a duke publicly accusing a lord of murder, the kind of story that sold papers and ruined reputations indiscriminately. "Your Grace, perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private." "No." Vincent's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "No more privacy. No more handling things quietly. Everything Harrison Thorne has done gets exposed. Everything I've allowed by staying silent gets exposed. Let all of it burn in the light." Davies looked profoundly uncomfortable. "I'll need to file a report. Take statements. This is beyond my authority to handle alone." "Then get someone with authority. Get the magistrate. Get whoever you need. I'm not going anywhere." Vincent sat down on the stairs of his own townhouse, his ribs screaming, his jaw swelling, and waited for the machinery of justice to grind into motion. Around him, more neighbors gathered, more witnesses, more people who'd carry this story to every corner of London. Good. That's what he wanted. No shadows. No backroom deals. Just the ugly truth exposed to everyone. Davies sent one of his men for the magistrate. The wait stretched long. Vincent sat on those cold stairs and thought about Clara somewhere in the night, carrying his brother's journal toward the one editor brave enough to print it. Thought about Edmund protecting her. Thought about Beatrice waking to discover her husband had just destroyed both their families in one desperate gambit. Thought about his father and brother, both dead from choosing different paths that led to the same grave. One by surrender, one by resistance. And Vincent himself choosing a third option that might kill him too, but at least he'd die standing. Maybe that's all any man really had, the choice of how to face the end. The magistrate arrived just before dawn. Sir Edmund Thornhill, a man Vincent knew from parliamentary sessions, generally considered incorruptible but cautious to a fault. He took in the scene with judicial precision, his expression giving nothing away. Duke Ashford, Constable Davies tells me you've made some extraordinary claims. I've made factual statements about crimes committed against my family. Whether they're extraordinary depends on how jaded you are about noble corruption. Thornhill's mouth tightened. You understand that accusing Lord Thorne of murder is not something to be done lightly. I understand that staying silent about murder is complicity. I'm done being complicit. Do you have proof? My brother's journal, his investigation into Thorne's embezzlement, his suspicions about the marriage contract, his final entry written 3 days before he conveniently died in a riding accident. All of it documented in his own hand. All of it being published in the London Chronicle this morning. Thornhill went very still. You've taken this to the press. Because taking it to judges and magistrates means it disappears into whatever pocket Harrison Thorne owns. The press might be bought too, but at least they'll publish it before they bury it. You've destroyed yourself, Your Grace. You know that, don't you? Vincent laughed, the sound hollow. Everyone keeps saying that like I'm supposed to care. I spent 5 years being destroyed slowly, piece by piece, while pretending everything was fine. At least this destruction is honest. Thornhill studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he sat down on the stairs beside Vincent. Your father would have handled this differently. My father died miserable and alone, having spent his entire life protecting a legacy that meant nothing to him. I'm not my father. No, you're considerably more reckless. Thornhill pulled out a pipe, packed it thoughtfully. But possibly braver. I knew your brother, you know. Charles was a good man, an honest man. When he died, I had questions, but questions without proof are just conspiracy theories, and investigating a lord on conspiracy theories is career suicide. And investigating him with proof? Still suicide, just more justified. Thornhill lit his pipe. If what you say is true, if that journal contains what you claim, Harrison Thorne will fight back with everything he has. He'll destroy witnesses, buy silence, make evidence disappear. You'll be painted as a madman, a jealous duke trying to avoid his own corruption by blaming someone else. Let him try. The truth is already out there, already spreading. He can kill me, but he can't kill the story. You're counting on public opinion to save you. I'm counting on public opinion to bury him. Whether I survive the burial is secondary. Thornhill smoked in silence for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was careful. There are procedures, legal processes. If I were to investigate these claims officially, it would take months, years potentially. During that time, you'd be vulnerable. Thorne would have every opportunity to silence you. Then I guess I better stay loud. Or, Thornhill glanced at the gathering crowd, then back to Vincent. Or you could accept protective custody. Let me lodge you somewhere safe while I build a case. Use your brother's journal as foundation and expand from there. Do this properly instead of through scandal sheets. Vincent shook his head. The moment I hide, I lose. Thorne will spin it as guilt, as cowardice. The narrative becomes about me running instead of him stealing. No, I stay visible, stay public, make myself too watched to disappear quietly. That's remarkably dangerous. Everything worth doing is. Thornhill stood, his expression troubled. I'll investigate. Officially, thoroughly. But I can't promise it'll be enough to bring charges. Lords protect lords, even corrupted ones. Then I'll settle for the exposure destroying his reputation. Justice takes many forms. The magistrate left. The crowd began to disperse as dawn lightened the sky. Davies posted 2 constables at the townhouse, ostensibly for Vincent's protection, but probably also to make sure he didn't flee. Vincent didn't care. He went inside, found Edmund had returned through the back entrance. Clara? Vincent asked immediately. Safe. Delivered the journal to Blackwood herself. He's setting type now. First edition hits the streets in 3 hours. Edmund's expression was grim. She wanted to come back. I told her absolutely not. She's staying at Blackwood's residence under guard until this is over. Good. That's good. Vincent's legs suddenly felt weak. The adrenaline that had carried him through the night was fading, leaving behind pain and exhaustion and the realization of what he'd actually done. He'd declared war on one of England's most powerful lords, destroyed his own reputation in the process, guaranteed that whatever came next would be ugly and public and probably fatal, and he'd do it again. Edmund helped him to a chair. Your Grace, your ribs need binding. Your jaw might be fractured. You should see a physician. Later. First I need to... Vincent stopped, unsure what came next. He'd been running on rage and desperation for so long that actually stopping felt impossible. You need to rest, Edmund said firmly. You've done what you can do. Now we wait to see how London responds. London's response came faster than expected. The Chronicle's morning edition sold out in an hour. Blackwood had run the story on the front page with the headline, Duke exposes noble corruption, brother murdered for fortune. Below it, excerpts from Charles's journal, names, dates, specific amounts embezzled, everything laid out in careful detail with the source material attributed directly to a dead duke's handwriting. It was journalistic dynamite. By noon, every paper in London had picked up the story. Some defended Harrison Thorne, others called for immediate investigation. A few brave souls started digging into other Thorne business dealings, smelling blood in the water. By evening, Parliament was in emergency session. Vincent watched it all from his townhouse, his ribs bound, his jaw iced, reading paper after paper with something like awe. He'd expected resistance, expected silence, expected the nobility to close ranks and protect one of their own. Instead, he was watching an empire crack, because Charles's journal hadn't just documented Thorne's crimes against the Ashford family. It had documented his crimes against others. Small mentions of bribes paid to this lord, blackmail used against that minister, threats leveled at anyone who questioned his methods. And now that Vincent had broken the silence, others were finding their courage. Lord Waverley published a statement about pressure he'd faced from Thorne. Duke Morrison admitted to being blackmailed over a youthful indiscretion. One by one, the men Harrison had controlled started talking, and the picture that emerged was of a criminal enterprise disguised as legitimate business, the kind of story that sold papers and ended careers. Beatrice came to see him on the third day. Vincent was in the study when Edmund announced her. He almost refused the visit, almost sent her away without a word. But curiosity won out. Curiosity about what she could possibly say that would matter now. She entered the study looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. Not physically. She was still perfectly dressed, perfectly coiffed, perfectly composed. But something in her had diminished. The certainty, the arrogance, the absolute conviction that she controlled the world around her. Vincent. Beatrice. They stood on opposite sides of the room, 5 years of marriage and lifetimes of damage between them. My father wants to kill you, she said finally. Literally. He's been trying to hire someone to do it quietly for 2 days. So far, no one will take the contract because you've made yourself too public. Good to know my strategy is working. This isn't a game, Vincent. He's desperate. Desperate men do desperate things. Let him try. I'm done being afraid of your father. Beatrice moved to the window, looking out at the street where reporters had been camping for days. You've destroyed us, both families, the Ashford name and the Thorne name. Neither will ever recover from this. Families built on lies and theft don't deserve to recover. Is that what you tell yourself? That you're some kind of hero? She turned, and her eyes were fierce. You're just as selfish as my father, just as willing to burn everything down. The only difference is you're doing it for love instead of power. If you can't see the difference between those motivations, then you're more damaged than I thought. And if you think love makes destruction noble, then you're more naive. Beatrice crossed her arms. What happens when this is over, Vincent? When my father is in prison or dead? When your title is stripped and the Ashford estates are seized? When you're living in poverty with your seamstress trying to survive on romantic ideals and no practical skills? How long before love starves to death? Vincent met her eyes. I don't know. But at least I'll find out honestly instead of suffocating in a golden cage wondering what real life felt like. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, tired. I didn't know. About your brother. About the murder. I swear to you, Vincent, I didn't know. Does it matter? It matters to me. I knew my father was ambitious, ruthless, but I thought he drew the line somewhere. Finding out there was no line is... She stopped, started again. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know what I've done, how I've treated you, how I've been complicit in all of it, even if I didn't know the full extent. I just needed you to know that I didn't know about Charles. Vincent studied his wife, tried to find hatred, found only exhaustion. What will you do? Testify, probably. The magistrate has already questioned me twice. I've told them everything I know about my father's business dealings. It's not much, but it's something. She laughed bitterly. Turns out betraying your family is easier when they've already destroyed themselves. Who knew? You could have lied for him. I could have. 5 years ago, I would have. But watching you choose truth over survival made me realize something. She looked at him fully. I've spent my entire life being my father's daughter, his weapon, his chess piece. I don't know who I am when I'm not that, but I'd like to find out. It's terrifying, Vincent said quietly. Becoming yourself instead of what others made you. Is it worth it? Ask me when I'm not sitting in a ruined townhouse with broken ribs and murder threats. Beatrice almost smiled. Almost. For what it's worth, I hope you survive this. I hope you and your seamstress get your happy ending. Someone should. She left. Vincent watched her go and felt something that might have been grief for the marriage that never was. For the people they might have been if they'd met in a different world with different families and different expectations. But they hadn't. And grief didn't change facts. The trial took 3 months to arrange. 3 months of Vincent living under constant guard, Clara hidden in various safe houses, Edmund coordinating between lawyers and journalists, and the growing list of witnesses willing to testify against Harrison Thorne. 3 months of the scandal growing, spreading, consuming everything in its path. Harrison fought back viciously, hired the best lawyers, called in every favor, painted Vincent as a madman, Charles's journal as forgery, the whole thing as an elaborate scheme to avoid Vincent's own embezzlement. But the evidence was overwhelming, and more importantly, the public had turned. The common people of London, tired of noble corruption, tired of being crushed under aristocratic boots, had latched onto this story like salvation. A duke who chose truth over legacy. A seamstress who loved him anyway. A murdered brother whose final act was documenting the crime. It was the kind of story people needed to believe in. The trial itself was a theater. Harrison's lawyers were brilliant, attacking every piece of evidence, questioning every witness, creating doubt wherever possible. But Charles's journal was unassailable. Handwriting experts verified it. Multiple witnesses confirmed the contents. And when Beatrice took the stand and testified against her own father, the courtroom went silent. She told them everything. Every conversation she'd overheard, every suspicious transaction, every time Harrison had bragged about how he controlled men through fear and leverage. She was calm, precise, devastating. Harrison screamed at her from the defendant's table, called her traitor, threatened her, had to be restrained by guards. The jury took 4 hours to return a verdict. Guilty on 23 counts of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and 1 count of murder in the death of Charles Ashford. Harrison Thorne was sentenced to life in prison. Vincent wasn't in the courtroom when the verdict came down. He was with Clara in a small apartment Blackwood had found for them, far from the reporters and the crowds and the machinery of justice grinding toward its conclusion. They sat by a window, watching London move below them. And when Edmund brought the news, Vincent felt something release in his chest that had been clenched tight for 5 years. It's over, he said quietly. Clara took his hand. Is it? What about your title, your estates? Parliament stripped the title 2 weeks ago. The estates are being held in trust pending investigation into how much of the Ashford fortune was stolen versus earned. I'll probably get some of it back eventually. Maybe. But the dukedom is gone. How do you feel? Vincent thought about it, really thought about it. Lighter. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long, I forgot what it felt like to move without the weight. And now? Now I'm just Vincent, no title, no estates, no legacy to protect. Just a man who needs to figure out what to do with the rest of his life. Clara smiled. I might have some ideas about that. They left London 3 days later. Not fleeing, just leaving. There was nothing holding them there anymore. No title to maintain. No obligations to fulfill. No one to answer to except themselves. Edmund came with them, the old servant claiming he'd rather follow an honest man without a title than serve dishonest ones with it. They took a coach to a village in the countryside that Vincent had never visited, but Clara had always dreamed about. Small, quiet. The kind of place where no one cared if you'd been a duke or a seamstress, only whether you paid your debts and treated people decently. They found a house on the edge of the village, small, old, the kind of place that needed work but had good bones. Vincent had some money left from the portion of his estate that had been verified as untainted. Not a fortune, but enough to start something new. Clara opened a dressmaking shop in the front room, not servicing nobility, servicing the village women who needed practical clothes that were still beautiful, who wanted to feel special without being made to feel lesser. She had an eye for it, for making people feel seen. Within months, women were coming from surrounding villages just to have Clara Whitmore make them something that fit not just their bodies, but their lives. Vincent helped, learned to sew passively, managed the books, discovered he was actually good with numbers when they weren't being used to hide corruption. And in the quiet moments between customers, he started writing. Not about politics or nobility, about his brother, about the cost of legacy, about what it meant to choose yourself over everything you'd been raised to become. A publisher in London bought the manuscript, not because Vincent had been a duke, because the story was true. Edmund opened a small tavern next door, called it The Honest Duke, in a fit of irony that made Vincent laugh until his still-healing ribs ached. It became the village gathering place, the spot where farmers and laborers came to drink and talk and complain about the nobility in London that didn't give a damn about them. Vincent served the mail and listened to their stories and learned more about real life in those months than he'd learned in 28 years of being Duke of Ashford. Beatrice divorced him quietly. Moved to France. Last Vincent heard, she was living under an assumed name, working in a bookshop in Paris, trying to figure out who she was when she wasn't Beatrice Thorne. Vincent hoped she found peace, doubted she would, but hope was cheaper than certainty. Harrison Thorne died in prison 6 months after his conviction. Heart attack, the report said. Vincent suspected it was more suicide than natural causes. A man who'd spent his whole life controlling everything, finally trapped somewhere he couldn't manipulate his way out of. The irony was sharp. Vincent didn't attend the funeral. 1 year after the trial, Vincent married Clara in the village church. Simple ceremony. No nobility, just villagers who'd become friends, Edmund standing as witness, Blackwood traveling from London to see it through. Clara wore a dress she'd made herself. White, beautiful, entirely hers. Vincent stood at the altar and made promises he actually meant. To love her, to honor her, to build a life that was honest even when honesty was hard. And when the vicar pronounced them married, Vincent kissed his wife and felt something he'd never felt as a duke. Free. They honeymooned in a cottage by the sea. The same sea Vincent had once dreamed of sailing. They walked the beaches, collected shells, made love in the afternoons when the sun turned the water gold. And one evening, sitting on the sand watching the tide come in, Clara asked the question Vincent had been waiting for. Do you miss it? Any of it? Vincent thought about Windsor Palace, the title, the weight of expectations and legacy, the life he'd been born into and walked away from. I miss my brother, he said finally. I miss who I might have been if he'd lived, if Thorne had never entered our lives. But the dukedom, the estates, that whole world? He shook his head. That was a prison I mistook for a palace. I don't miss prisons. Even when this gets hard, when we're struggling to pay for repairs or the shop isn't making enough, or village politics get ugly, especially then because those problems are real. They're mine, not inherited, not forced on me. Just the normal human struggle of building a life worth living. Clara leaned against him. I love you, Vincent Ashford, who used to be a duke. I love you, Clara Ashford, who used to be a seamstress. I'm still a seamstress. And I'm still me, just a better version, the version that chooses right instead of easy. They sat there until the sun set and the stars came out and the sea whispered its endless patient song. And Vincent realized something he'd learned too late, but learned thoroughly. Power didn't make you strong. Legacy didn't make you matter. Titles didn't make you worth loving. What made you strong was choosing yourself when the world demanded surrender, What made you matter was building something true instead of inheriting something hollow. What made you worth loving was showing up honestly, broken pieces and all, and letting someone see you without the armor. Vincent had spent 5 years as a duke and learned nothing except how to be miserable with style. He'd spent 1 year as just Vincent and learned how to be happy in a cottage with a woman who saw him, not his title, who loved him for his choices, not his inheritance, who built a life with him instead of around him. That was worth more than any dukedom. 2 years later, Clara gave birth to a daughter. They named her Charlotte, after Vincent's brother Charles. Not to carry on legacy, not to inherit anything, just to remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up for truth even when it kills you, and to hope that the next generation learned that lesson without having to die for it. Vincent held his daughter and looked into eyes that held no expectations, no demands, no weight of aristocratic obligation. Just the simple human need to be loved and protected and given room to become whoever she wanted to be. "I promise," he whispered to her, "you get to choose. Whatever you become, whoever you love, however you live, it's yours, not mine, not anyone's but yours." Clara watched from the bed, exhausted and beautiful and alive. "Good promise. I spent my whole life having other people's promises forced on me. She gets better." "We both do," Clara said softly. "That's the point of all this, right? Making sure the next generation gets the freedom we had to fight for." Vincent kissed his daughter's forehead, then his wife's, and he thought about his father, dead from a life he hated, his brother, dead from trying to change it, himself, alive because he'd finally been willing to burn it all down and build something new from the ashes. Maybe that was the real legacy. Not titles or estates or names in history books, just the courage to choose yourself, to pick truth over comfort, to build love instead of inheriting obligation, and to pass that choice on to those who came after. Years passed. The village grew. The shop thrived. Edmund's Tavern became legendary for its honest ale and its owner's willingness to throw out anyone who mistreated servants. Vincent wrote 3 more books, each one selling better than the last, each one chipping away at the mythology of noble superiority. Charlotte grew up wild and free, running through fields her father once would have owned, learning to sew from her mother, learning to think from her father, learning to be herself from everyone who loved her without condition. And sometimes, late at night when Clara slept and the village was quiet, Vincent stood at his window and looked toward London, toward the palace, toward the life he'd walked away from. He didn't regret leaving, but he did remember. Remember the boy who'd wanted to sail away. The young man forced into a title he never wanted. The duke who'd suffocated under obligation until a seamstress showed him what honest conversation felt like. The desperate fool who'd burned his entire world down for love. All of them were still inside him. All of them had led him here. And here was good. Here was a cottage with creaking floors and drafty windows. A wife who knew his worst parts and loved him anyway. A daughter who'd never know what a dukedom felt like and would be better for it. A village full of people who valued work over titles and decency over pedigree. Here was freedom, messy, uncertain, real. Vincent closed the window and went back to bed. Back to Clara's warmth and the simple human comfort of sleeping beside someone you chose and who chose you back. The dukedom was someone else's problem now. The legacy was someone else's burden. The Ashford name would fade from memory or be remembered as a cautionary tale about corruption. Vincent didn't care. He'd found something better than legacy. He'd found life. And that was enough. More than enough. Everything.